I've been a sheriff for most of my life, and I can tell you this. Most nights are quiet. The kind of quiet that sinks into your bones. People think working in a small county means constant trouble, bar fights, car chases, meth labs in the woods. But truth is, most of it is waiting, driving the same roads, staring at the same fields, listening to the same night wind brushing against your window. I used to like that part. The stillness. The sense that I was the only one awake, like the whole county was sleeping, and it was my job to keep watch. I'd sip my coffee, hum along to the radio, and tell myself I was keeping people safe just by being there. But every now and then, that stillness, it shifts. And it's like the world wants to remind you that you're not as alone as you think. This was one of those nights. It was late, close to midnight. My headlights cut across empty farmland as I rolled down Route 7. Nothing but cornfields and old fence posts leaning like tired men. I was half asleep behind the wheel, not in a dangerous way, just in that slow, hypnotic rhythm patrol gives you. I remember glancing at the clock, thinking about heading back to the station for another cup of coffee, when something caught my eye. Up ahead, past the bend in the road, there were lights. Not headlights, not taillights. Stationary lights. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at because that stretch of road is empty. Has been for years. Then I saw it clear. The glowing sign of a gas station. That didn't make sense. The old Sinclair station on Route 7 had been shut down for, what? 15, maybe 20 years? Ever since the owner, Old Man Connors, died. Place was boarded up, windows smashed out by kids, pumps rusting in the weeds. A dead shell sitting there like a broken tooth on the highway. Everyone knew it. Everyone avoided it. And yet here it was, lit up like it was 1987 again, fluorescent tubes buzzing, the green dinosaur logo glowing faintly through the years of grime, even the red open sign pulsing in the window. I slowed the cruiser, my stomach tightening. You've got to understand. Gas stations are like lighthouses out here. You see one burning after midnight, you don't question it, you just pull in. It means coffee, warmth, maybe another human face to prove you're not the last man on Earth. But this one was supposed to be dead. I rolled off the highway, gravel crunching under my tires. The station looked alive from a distance, but as I got closer, it didn't match up. The building was still the same rotting husk, boards nailed across some of the windows, paint peeling in long curls. And yet the lights hummed overhead, bathing everything in this pale, sickly glow. The pumps stood tall, but the numbers on the display screens flickered nonsense, like they were caught between digits. And then, I saw someone. A man. He was standing by one of the pumps, his back to me. At first I thought maybe it was some drifter. We get them sometimes. Guys passing through, looking for shelter, maybe busted down on their luck. But something about the way he stood froze me in place. He wasn't moving. Not pumping gas, not smoking a cigarette, just standing. I killed the engine and stepped out. The night air hit me sharp, colder than it should have been for September. "Evening," I called. My voice carried across the lot. "Station's closed." "Has been for years." The man didn't turn. I felt my throat dry up. I tried again, louder. "You hear me? This place ain't open." Silence. I stepped closer, my boots crunching on gravel. I could see more of him now. He was wearing an old brown jacket, the kind you'd find in a thrift store, shoulders hunched up like he was cold. His hair was dark, slicked back against his head. From where I stood, it looked wet. "Sir," I said, resting my hand on my belt near the holster. "I'm gonna need you to face me." Nothing. I edged closer, and that's when the smell hit me. Gasoline, strong, too strong. It poured off him like sweat, stinging my nose and throat. My eyes watered, and I had to cover my mouth with my sleeve. The man lifted his head slightly, not turning toward me, just tilting it back like he was sniffing the air. I froze. There are moments in this job where training doesn't mean a damn thing. Your gut just knows, and right then, every part of me screamed not to go any closer. But I had to. I cleared my throat, forcing authority into my voice. "Step away from the pump, now!" That's when he finally moved. He didn't turn to face me. He just walked, slow, steady steps toward the dark station building. His hands hung loose at his sides, fingers twitching like he was brushing against something I couldn't see. The overhead lights flickered as he passed under them. I wanted to call for backup, radio in. But when I reached for my shoulder mic, all I got was static. A thick, choking hiss that made me flinch. The man reached the glass door of the station and stopped. He didn't push it open, didn't knock, just stood there staring at his own reflection in the glass. I followed a few steps behind, keeping my distance. My voice came out shakier than I liked. "Sir, I need you to tell me what you're doing out here. What's your name?" For the first time, he answered, not with words. His reflection in the glass smiled. I swear to God, I saw it. His actual body was still, but the reflection's lips peeled back in this wide, broken grin. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. My flashlight shook in my hand as I lit up the door, and just like that, it was gone. Reflection normal, blank face staring back at me. I was sweating now, cold sweat down my neck. Every instinct told me to leave. Just get back in the cruiser, drive away, forget this place. But I couldn't. This was my county, my road, my job. I tightened my grip on the light and took another step closer. That's when the man spoke. His lips moved slow, like each word cost him effort. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was wrong. Not loud, not angry, just hollow, like it came from inside the walls instead of his mouth. My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, the lights above us went out. Darkness swallowed the station. I froze, blind. The smell of gasoline stronger than ever. My flashlight flickered in my hand, struggling against the dark. And in that thin, weak beam, I saw the man turn. Finally, he faced me fully, and his eyes. They weren't eyes at all. Just deep black pits running down his cheeks like they'd been burned out. The smile from the reflection was on his real face now. I staggered back, nearly tripping over myself. My voice cracked as I shouted, "Stay where you are!" But it came out more like a plea than a command. He didn't move toward me. He didn't have to, because the door behind him creaked open on its own, and I swear I saw movement in there. Shadows slipping back into the aisles. Shapes ducking between the shelves. The man tilted his head again like he was listening. Then, without another word, he stepped inside. The door closed behind him, and the station went dark again. I stood there in the gravel, breathing hard, unable to move. The lot was empty. The pumps were dead. The sign was off. It was just the same old rotting shell it had always been. No lights. No man. Nothing. But the smell of gasoline lingered in the air. I didn't tell anyone about that night. Not at first. Because how could I? What would I say? That I saw a dead station come alive? That I spoke to a man without eyes? They'd have me turn in my badge, but I know what I saw. And that was only the beginning. I should have driven away that night. I should have taken the first excuse, the first scrap of doubt, and turned the cruiser back toward town. But I didn't. Something about that station had its hooks in me. Maybe it was duty. Maybe pride, or maybe it was just plain curiosity. Either way, I couldn't leave. Not yet. The building had gone dark again after the man stepped inside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't empty. The gasoline smell still clung thick in the air, sharp and chemical, like it had soaked into my skin. I found myself walking forward, one boot crunching at a time, until I reached the glass door. My flashlight beam shook as I pressed it against the pane. The reflection that stared back at me was pale, sweat shining across my forehead, jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth would crack. But beyond my own reflection, I saw light, not the harsh glow of fluorescence this time. It was softer, golden, like lamplight spilling from somewhere deep inside. And with it came a sound, faint, a low hum, almost like a radio searching for a station. I pushed the door. It opened easier than it should have, creaking on hinges I knew for a fact were rusted shut years ago. The air inside was different, warmer, heavy with cigarette smoke and something sweet, like old cologne. I stepped in slow, my flashlight cutting across cracked tile floors and shelves that should have been stripped bare. But they weren't. They were stocked. Cans lined neatly in rows, bags of chips stacked high, a row of glass bottles sweating in the cooler, labels bright and new, like no time had passed at all. I swear for a second I thought I'd walked into another year, and then I heard him. "Evening, Sheriff." The voice drifted from behind the counter. Smooth, calm, like he'd been expecting me. I swung the beam toward it. And there he was, the man I'd seen outside, only now he was smiling. He leaned against the counter like any clerk on night shift would. Brown jacket still clinging to his frame, hair slicked back, but up close, I could see the details clearer. His clothes weren't just old, they were out of time. The cut of the jacket, the worn leather boots, even the wide tie knotted at his neck. They looked pulled straight from the late 70s. Hall laughed nervously. "Guess the kids have been sneaking in here, huh?" I didn't answer, because the letters weren't carved with a knife or a key. They were burned in, the edges blackened, ash flaking when I touched them. That was enough for Hall. He backed out quick, muttering about bad air. But I stood there longer, staring at those words, feeling the gasoline sting in my lungs, always open, even when it looked dead, even when no one believed it. By the time we left, the sun was sinking. Hall kept trying to joke, but his voice was tight. I could tell the smell had gotten to him, too. When we reached the cruiser, he clapped me on the shoulder. "Sheriff, I think you just need rest." "There's nothing here." Hasn't been for 40 years. 40 years. The way he said it stuck with me. Later that night, back at the station, I dug through the old records. The Sinclair had closed in '81 after Connors died. That part I already knew, but buried in the files was a report I'd never seen before. A patrol car, my badge number, long before it was mine, had stopped there one night in 1980. The report was short, just a few lines. The deputy wrote about seeing lights, about a man in a brown jacket at the pumps. He wrote about the smell of gasoline, and then nothing. The report ended mid-sentence. That deputy never filed another. I sat there staring at the page until the words blurred. My hands were cold, shaking, because I realized something. What happened to me hadn't been the first time, and maybe it wouldn't be the last. I folded the report back into the file, closed the drawer, and sat in silence. The faint smell of gasoline clung to me, even though I'd showered, even though I'd washed my clothes. It never left. It's still here now, if I'm being honest. Faint but sharp, like it's inside me, like it soaked into my lungs that night and never let go. I don't drive Route 7 anymore, not after dark. I tell the new deputies it's because the road's too empty, too easy to fall asleep on. But the truth is, I'm afraid the lights will come back on, afraid I'll see him again, waiting by the pumps with that smile, afraid that one day I won't leave fast enough, and maybe, when that day comes, I won't come back at all, because some places, they don't stay dead, they just wait. And the Sinclair station, it's always open. It started with a phone call. Most strange stories do. Dispatch rang me up just after 10 o'clock. The voice on the other end was steady but uneasy. Local farmer said he'd been driving home when he spotted a girl standing out on Mill Creek Bridge. Said she was alone. No car, no bike, no reason to be there. I almost brushed it off. Folks call in all kinds of things late at night. Loose cattle, a kid walking home, sometimes even their own shadow stretched too long across the road. But there was something in his voice. A hesitation. He didn't just say he saw a girl. He said it like he wasn't sure she was real. So I went. Mill Creek Bridge isn't much to look at. Just an old span of concrete with rusted guardrails, crossing a narrow creek at the bottom of a wooded slope. Most nights it's pitch black out there, not a single streetlight for miles. You drive across it without even thinking. Just another quiet stretch of road in the county. But that night I slowed my cruiser as I came up on it. My headlights swept across the bridge, painting the rails in pale light. And there she was. A girl, standing dead center, facing the creek below. She was small, thin frame, long dark hair falling over her shoulders. She wore a pale dress that fluttered faintly in the breeze, the kind of dress nobody wears out here anymore. Something about it felt wrong, like a costume out of time. I pulled over, eased the cruiser onto the shoulder. For a moment, I just watched her. She didn't move, didn't turn. Just stood there with her arms hanging at her sides, like she'd been planted in place. Finally, I stepped out. My boots hit gravel loud in the silence. "Miss?" I called, keeping my voice calm. "You all right out here?" No answer. I walked closer, my flashlight cutting through the dark. Each step echoed against the bridge. My hand hovered near my belt, not on the gun, just close. Something in the air told me to be careful. When I was maybe 20 feet away, I stopped. The smell hit me first. Damp, river water and mildew. The kind of smell that clings to you after waiting in a creek too long. "Miss?" I said again, softer this time. "It's late. You need help getting home?" Still nothing. I raised my light higher, the beam spilling over her shoulders. And I realized she wasn't looking at the creek. She was staring straight down. Her head hung low, hair covering her face, body stiff as a board. I felt my chest tighten. 1,000 thoughts crossed my mind all at once. Run away, someone in shock, maybe a girl about to do something terrible. I took another careful step forward, ready to reach for her arm. That's when my radio crackled. "Unit 12, you on scene?" I jumped, hand flying to my shoulder mic. "Yeah, I've got her in sight." "Young female, standing on the bridge. Not responsive yet." Static hissed, then the dispatcher came back. "Copy that. Just so you know, you're the third call tonight." My stomach dropped. "Third?" 2 separate reports earlier. Both times, deputies responded. No one was there. I turned back to the girl. My flashlight beam shook in my hand. She was gone. One blink. One breath and the bridge was empty. I froze in place. Scanning the rails, the road, the creek below. Nothing. No splash, no footsteps, no sound. Just an empty bridge under the glow of my headlights. My throat went dry. I muttered into the radio. She's gone. No visual. The dispatcher paused before answering. "Copy that. Return to patrol when ready." I didn't return right away. I stood there on that bridge, listening to the quiet creek, staring at the spot where she'd been. I kept telling myself she must have slipped into the trees when I turned, that I'd just missed it. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. There was nowhere to go. Nowhere she could have disappeared without me seeing. I finally climbed back in the cruiser, shut the door, and pulled away. But I couldn't shake the image. That pale dress, that stillness, that silence. I didn't sleep well that night. The calls kept coming. Over the next week, 3 more reports came in. Always the same. A girl on the bridge, always at night. By the time a deputy arrived, she was gone. Sometimes the caller described her in detail. Long hair, pale dress, thin small frame. Every detail matched. Hall was the first to joke about it at the station. Said we'd found ourselves a new ghost story, a new lady in white to tell rookies on slow nights. The others laughed. But I didn't, because I'd seen her, and I couldn't forget the way the air felt around her. Heavy, still, like the moment before a storm breaks. A month passed, then another. Fewer calls came in, but they didn't stop completely. Each time I felt that same unease creep back into my chest. Each time I wondered if she'd show herself to me again, and one night she did. It was late, close to midnight again. I was running patrol, heading down Route 9 when I saw it. My headlights stretched long across Mill Creek Bridge, and there she was. The girl, exactly where she'd been the first time. Same dress, same stance, same hanging head. I slowed the cruiser, heart thudding in my chest. I told myself not to get out this time, not to play along, but my hand was already on the door. I stepped out, the night colder than it should have been. My flashlight trembled in my grip as I called, "Miss?" Nothing. I took one step, then another, each one echoing off the bridge. The air felt thick again, wet and heavy. The smell of the creek rose sharp in my nose. When I was close enough, I raised the light, and that's when I saw her face. For the first time, she looked up at me. Her skin was pale, waterlogged. Her eyes dark and hollow like she'd been pulled from the creek itself. Her lips moved slowly, forming words I couldn't hear. I froze, every muscle locked. My voice caught in my throat. What did you say?" she whispered again. This time I heard it. "Help me!" The words were faint, gurgling, like her lungs were full of water. I stepped forward instinctively, reaching out. And then she was gone. Vanished, like before. The bridge stood empty, my flashlight beam falling on nothing but wet concrete. But the smell lingered. Stronger now, damp and sour, like river water soaked deep into my clothes. I staggered back, breath shaking. My hands were cold, numb. I didn't radio it in this time. I didn't want to hear the silence on the other end, didn't want to explain what I'd seen. I just climbed back into the cruiser and drove. The bridge disappeared behind me in the rear view, swallowed by dark. But her voice stayed. Help me. I still hear it now, if I'm honest. It comes back at the quietest moments, driving at night, lying awake in bed, even sitting here telling you this story. The sound of water in her throat, the plea that never leaves, and deep down, I know this isn't over, because every time I pass Mill Creek Bridge, I can feel her there, waiting. I didn't want to see her again. That might sound strange. After all the calls, all the restless nights, all the talk at the station, most men would want proof. Most would want an answer to the whispers and shadows. But not me. Not anymore, because proof meant she was real. And if she was real, then I had to face what that meant. For weeks after that second sighting, I avoided the bridge. I drove miles out of my way to steer clear of it. Deputies teased me, not knowing the truth, not knowing what I'd seen in her eyes. I let them laugh. It was easier that way. But avoidance doesn't last forever. Not in this line of work. It was late September when the call came in. Farmer again, same as the first time. Said there was a girl standing on Mill Creek Bridge. Said she looked like she needed help. I tried to pawn it off on Hall, tried to make up an excuse. But dispatch was insistent. Sheriff, you're the closest unit. You'll get there fastest. So I went. The night was still when I arrived. Too still. Even the crickets had gone quiet. Like they knew something I didn't. My headlights swept the length of the bridge, and there she was, the girl. Same pale dress, same long hair, same small frame standing in the middle of the road. Only this time, she wasn't facing the creek. She was facing me. Her head hung low, chin tucked to her chest, but her body was turned square toward the cruiser, like she'd been waiting. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, hands gripping the wheel so tight they hurt. My chest ached with every breath. Part of me thought if I just sat there long enough, she'd vanish like before, just blink out. But she didn't. So I opened the door. The night air was cold, damp with the smell of the creek. I stepped out slow, boots crunching on gravel. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, catching her pale figure in the center of the bridge. "Miss," I called, voice breaking in my throat. "You don't need to be out here. It's not safe." She didn't answer. I took a few steps forward, the sound of the creek rushing faintly below us. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was wading into deep water. "Do you live nearby?" I asked. "Do you need me to call someone for you?" She lifted her head. Her hair fell back, revealing her face. And I'll never forget it. Her skin was pale, waxy, lips tinged blue like she'd been pulled straight from the water. Her eyes were wide, dark hollows that glistened in the beam of my light, and yet there was something fragile about her, something lost. Her lips parted. For a long moment, nothing came out. Then, in a voice soft as breath, she whispered two words. A date. October 14th. That was all. The words echoed in my head, louder than the creek, louder than the night. October 14th. I swallowed hard. What happened October 14th? She didn't answer. She just stared at me, eyes wide, lips trembling like she was trying to say more but couldn't. Then she looked down, back toward the water, and before I could take another step, she vanished. One blink, one heartbeat, and she was gone. The bridge was empty again, but the date hung in my mind like a weight. October 14th. I barely remember driving back. My hands shook the whole way. The radio buzzed in with dispatch, asking for a status report, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What was I supposed to say? That a dead girl whispered a date in my ear? When I got back to the station, I went straight to the archives. Dusty file cabinets, yellowing papers, old reports going back decades. I flipped through them until my fingers were black with ink and dust. And then I found it. October 14th, 1979. Local boy, 8 years old, drowned in Mill Creek. I sat there staring at the words on the page until my chest hurt. His name was Daniel Ward. He'd been playing near the creek with friends. Slipped in, By the time anyone noticed, it was too late. They pulled his body out downstream. The report was simple, factual, cold. But the date matched exactly. I leaned back in my chair, the fluorescent light above buzzing faintly, the edges of my vision swimming with exhaustion. My skin prickled cold. The girl knew. She wasn't some prank, wasn't some ghost story kids whispered about. She was tied to something real. Something that had happened years before I ever put on a badge. I closed the file, but the weight didn't lift. Instead, I felt heavier. That night, I dreamed of her. She stood on the bridge again, dress clinging wet to her frame, lips moving soundlessly. I tried to reach her, but my boots stuck to the concrete like it was sinking beneath me. The creek rose higher, water lapping over the guardrails. And still she stared at me, whispering words I couldn't hear. When I woke, the sheets were damp with sweat. The next night, I drove back to Mill Creek. Not on a call. Not for duty, just me. I told myself it was for answers, but truthfully, it was something deeper. Something like guilt. The bridge was empty when I arrived. Moonlight stretched long across the concrete, the creek below glimmering like oil. I stood there a long time, listening, waiting. Finally, I whispered, October 14th. Why? Why that day? The creek answered with a rush of water. The wind tugged at my jacket. But no girl appeared. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone. And then, faintly, I heard it. A splash. Downstream. I froze. Leaning over the guardrail, flashlight beam trembling across the water. For a split second, I swore I saw a small figure beneath the surface. Arms thrashing, head bobbing up once, twice before the current pulled it under. I shouted without thinking, voice cracking in the night. Hold on! I scrambled down the embankment, boots sliding in the mud. My hands tore on branches as I clawed my way to the water's edge. But when I reached the creek, nothing. Just black water rushing past, carrying leaves and broken branches. My chest heaved. My heart hammered. And then behind me, soft and close, help me! I spun around. She stood at the tree line. The girl. Her pale dress clung to her body, dripping. Her hair hung in wet ropes across her face. I stumbled back, nearly slipping into the creek. My voice shook. Who are you? What do you want from me? She raised her hand, pointed to the water. Her lips moved again, whispering the same date, October 14th. And then she was gone. The trees rustled softly where she'd been, but nothing else. I climbed back up to the road, legs trembling, breath ragged. The bridge stretched out silent under the moon. I didn't go home that night. I sat in the cruiser by the bridge until dawn, staring at the water, listening for her voice. When the sun finally rose, I drove back into town. I stopped at the library, pulled old newspapers from the archives. I wanted to know everything about that boy, Daniel Ward. I found the article. Front page of the county paper, dated October 15th, 1979. The photo showed his parents standing on the bridge, faces twisted with grief. And beside them, in the background, blurred and faint, a girl, long hair, pale dress, standing at the rail. My blood ran cold. I touched the photo with my fingertips, heart pounding in my chest. It was her. The girl on the bridge. She'd been there that night 40 years ago, and she was still there now. I don't know what she wants from me. I don't know why she chose me, but I can't ignore her anymore, because every time I close my eyes, I see her face, and I hear her whisper. October 14th, her last night. I still remember the smell that night. It wasn't anything unusual. Not at first, just the sour mix of old coffee, sweat, and disinfectant that always clung to the station walls. But for some reason, it felt heavier, like the air itself didn't want to move. I'd been sheriff of our little county long enough to know when a night was going to drag, and that one had the weight of something bad. The kind of bad you can't point at, but you feel it in your bones. Around 9 o'clock, a deputy brought in a drifter. Tall man, thin but not frail. Dirty clothes, dust caked on his boots, and hair that looked like it hadn't seen a comb in weeks. He didn't put up a fight, didn't even argue. Just walked in with his head low like he knew this part of his life was already decided. We didn't have much on him. Trespassing, maybe loitering, disturbing the peace. The kind of charges that usually meant a night in the holding cells until morning when the judge could sort it out. Nothing special. Nothing to worry about. But the moment I saw him, something in my chest tightened. It wasn't his face. I couldn't even remember his face after he left. What I remember were his eyes. They were pale, cloudy almost, like glass left out in the rain. And he didn't blink the way most people do. He stared long and steady, like he was trying to memorize every crack in the floor, every shadow on the wall. We got him booked in. Name, or at least the one he gave us, was Thomas Ray. No ID, no wallet. Just a few crumpled bills shoved in his pocket. He didn't talk much. When he did, his voice was low, rough, like someone who hadn't used it in a while. I remember asking him where he was headed. He said, nowhere. Just like that. Flat. Empty. Normally, drifters talk. They tell you about jobs they lost, towns they've been run out of, family they're looking for. But Thomas, he had nothing. Just that single word. I should have left it at that, but something about him pulled at me. I asked if he wanted a lawyer, if he wanted to make a call. He shook his head. That was it. So we put him in holding, cell 4. Now you gotta understand something about our jail. It wasn't big. Just 6 cells lined along the back corridor, each one with steel bars and a concrete bench. They all looked the same, but cell 4, well, the men on night shift used to joke about it. They'd say it was colder than the others, that you could hear things in there if you sat long enough with the lights off. I'd always dismissed it as nonsense. Every building creaks, every vent hums. You work nights in a place like that and your brain starts to invent ghosts. But when we locked Thomas in cell 4, I swear I saw him smile. Not a wide grin, just the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth like he knew something the rest of us didn't. The deputies went about their business. Paperwork, calls, checking on the other cells. And for a while, everything seemed normal. Then the voices started. It was near midnight. I was in my office nursing cold coffee when Deputy Harris came in. His face was pale, his hand fidgeting with the brim of his hat. "Sheriff," he said, "you hear that?" I frowned. "Hear what?" He glanced over his shoulder like he was afraid something had followed him. "Voices from cell 4, I sighed, already tired of it. Probably the drifter talking to himself, but Harris shook his head. "No, sir." I checked. He's not saying a word, just sitting there staring at the wall. But I heard voices, more than one. I didn't believe him, not really, but something in the way he said it made me set my coffee down. We walked back to the holding corridor together. The place was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. I stepped up to cell 4. Thomas was inside, just like Harris said. Sitting on the bench, hands in his lap, head tilted slightly like he was listening to something far away. "Thomas," I said. No answer. He didn't even look at me, and then I heard it. It was faint. So faint I thought maybe my ears were ringing. A whisper. Too soft to catch the words, but sharp enough to feel. Like the scrape of paper or the rush of someone's breath against your neck. I felt the hairs rise on my arms. I turned to Harris, ready to tell him it was just the pipes, when I realized the whisper wasn't coming from the vents. It wasn't echoing off the walls. It was coming from inside the cell. Thomas sat there, still as stone, but the whisper wove around him like threads pulling through the air. I stepped closer, gripping the bars. "Who's in there with you?" I asked. Finally, he looked at me. His eyes caught the light, pale and empty, and for the first time that night, he spoke more than a single word. "They're not with me," he said. "They're with you." The whisper stopped. Just like that. The silence hit harder than the sound had. I wanted to press him, demand an explanation, but something in my gut told me not to. Like if I asked the wrong question, I'd hear the answer in my own head. I locked up for the night, told Harris to keep watch, and tried to push the whole thing out of my mind. But the station felt different. Every creak of the floorboards made me tense. Every flicker of the light made my eyes snap up. It wasn't just me, either. Deputies rotated through, but each one came back with that same nervous look. They swore the whispers came and went, sometimes close, sometimes far. Some of them thought they heard their own names. I told them to keep quiet about it. Last thing I needed was panic, but deep down, I knew we weren't imagining it. And what unsettled me most wasn't the voices. It was Thomas. He didn't sleep, not once. He just sat there, staring at the wall, as if he was listening to something none of us could fully hear. Every now and then, that faint twitch of a smile would cross his face. Like Cell 4 wasn't a cage for him. Like it was a homecoming. By dawn, the whispers were gone. The building felt normal again, but I didn't. When I finally stepped outside, the morning air should have felt fresh, clean. Instead, it felt thin. Like I'd walked out of one cell and into another, one too big for me to ever escape. And for the first time in my career, I caught myself wondering if maybe the old jokes about Cell 4 weren't jokes at all. Maybe they were warnings. Warnings. I'd been too proud or too afraid to hear. Didn't want to come back the next night. That's the truth. I'd been sheriff for years, and I'd never once thought about walking away from the job. But after what happened with Thomas in Cell 4, I sat in my truck for a long time, just staring at the station, trying to convince myself that it was only exhaustion. You tell yourself things when you're afraid. You tell yourself it's just the building settling, or a draft in the vents, or your imagination running wild at 3 in the morning. I told myself all of that, and yet my hand still shook when I unlocked the front door. The deputies were quiet that evening, quieter than usual. No one wanted to bring it up, but I could see it in their faces, the lack of sleep, the way their eyes darted toward the holding corridor when they thought no one was looking. Thomas was gone. By sunrise, the judge had ordered him transferred to county, and a van came to take him away. I thought I'd feel relief when they drove off, but instead there was this emptiness, like the real problem hadn't left with him. We could have let it go. Should have, maybe, but Harris. He came to me with a thumb drive in his hand. "Sheriff," he said, his voice low, "you need to see this." I followed him into the back office where we kept the surveillance set up. Old monitors, flickering green lights, a hum that filled the room. Harris plugged the drive into the computer and opened a video file. It was footage from Cell 4. The timestamp showed midnight. I leaned forward, expecting to see Thomas sitting on the bench, just like he had all night. But the cell was empty. Completely empty. Still, something moved. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. A shadow pacing back and forth across the frame. Long steps, slow, deliberate, like a man deep in thought. I rubbed my eyes, leaned closer. The figure wasn't clear, not exactly. It looked more like the outline of a person, faint, as if the camera lens couldn't quite focus on it. But the movement was real. Back and forth, from the bars to the far wall, turning, repeating. I checked the time again. This was the same hour we'd all been hearing whispers. My mouth went dry. Was Thomas still inside then? Harris nodded. "Yes, sir. I checked on him myself. He didn't move an inch. Just sat there staring at the wall like before. I kept watching. The figure paced for a while, then stopped. It turned toward the camera, or at least I think it did. There was no face, not really, but I felt its focus, as if it knew we'd be watching later. And then it was gone. 1 second it was standing in the middle of the cell. The next it wasn't there at all. The room was silent except for the hum of the computer. Finally, I pushed back from the desk. "Don't show this to anyone else," I told Harris. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Not yet," he hesitated. "Sheriff, we've got the right to know what's in this building." I shook my head. "What we've got is a drunk tank with creaky floors and bad wiring. And if we start saying otherwise, people are going to think we've lost our damn minds." But even as I said it, I couldn't get the image out of my head. That pacing, that slow, steady pacing, like something had worn a path in the concrete long before we ever built the place. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening for whispers, half expecting them to creep through the walls of my own house. When I did drift off, I dreamed of Cell 4. Only it wasn't a cell anymore. It was bigger, stretching out into darkness. The walls were damp, the floor uneven. I could hear water dripping somewhere far away. And in the middle of that darkness, I saw the figure, still pacing, back and forth, back and forth. When it turned toward me, I woke up. My chest ached. like I'd been holding my breath the whole time. I went in the next morning looking like hell, and the deputies weren't much better. I caught them whispering about the recording, about what it meant. Some wanted to delete it. Others wanted to call in experts or priests. But Harris said something that stuck with me. What if Thomas wasn't the problem? He asked. What if Cell 4's always been like this, and we just never noticed until now? I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to remind him of all the years we'd used those cells without incident. But the truth was, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was right. The pacing figure. It didn't look new. It looked practiced. Like something that had been repeating the same motion for a very, very long time. Over the next week, we tried to carry on like normal. The cells stayed mostly empty. We avoided using Cell 4 unless we had no choice. But the recordings kept piling up. Every time we checked the cameras, there it was, not always pacing. Sometimes it stood in the corner. Sometimes it sat on the bench. Once, I swear, it crouched by the bars as if listening to something on the other side. And every time, the cell was empty. I started to dread the sound of the hard drive spinning, the click of the mouse as Harris pulled up another clip. My stomach would knot before the footage even began, because I knew what I'd see. But the worst was the night shift. Deputies said the whispers grew louder, clearer. One man swore he heard his own mother's voice calling his name. Another said he heard children laughing. By the end of the week, no one wanted to work nights alone. Neither did I. I stayed late, sitting in my office with the door open, listening to the hum of the building. Every so often, I'd walk back to the cells, shine a flashlight down the corridor. Cell 4 was always the same. Dark, silent, empty. But standing there, I felt a pressure, like the air inside was thicker than everywhere else. One night, just after 2 in the morning, I made the mistake of stopping too long. I leaned against the bars, staring into the darkness. My flashlight beam caught the far wall, the bench, the cracks in the floor. And then I heard it, a single step. Not in the hall. Not behind me, inside the cell. I froze. My heart hammered in my chest. I knew the sound of boots on concrete. I knew the weight of it, the echo it left behind. I shone the light back and forth, but there was nothing. Just that same empty cell. Still, I swear the beam caught something for half a second. A shape in the corner, tall and still like a shadow where no shadow should be. I backed away, slow, careful, like prey trying not to startle a predator. By the time I reached my office, my hands were shaking too hard to hold the flashlight steady. I didn't tell the others what I'd seen. Not then, but I kept thinking about Thomas. How calm he'd been. How he'd said, "They're not with me. They're with you." At first, I thought he was just trying to spook us, but now I'm not so sure. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe Cell 4 isn't haunted by something that comes and goes. Maybe it's always there. And maybe, once you hear it, once you see it, it doesn't let you go. There's a certain point where curiosity turns into something darker. It isn't about answers anymore. It's about obsession, about digging even when you're afraid of what you might find. That's where I was with Cell 4. After the recordings, after the whispers, after that one step I swore I heard inside the empty cell, I couldn't leave it alone. The deputies avoided talking about it now, but I knew they felt it too. That weight in the air, that pressure in your skull, like someone else's breath brushing against your ear. I told myself I needed facts, something solid. Maybe then I'd convince myself it was just stories and nerves, but deep down I already knew better. So I went digging. The station was old, older than me, older than most of the deputies. Built back in the 60s when the county still had money to spare. Over the years, plenty of records had been boxed up and shoved in storage. Dusty files, reports no one had read in decades. I pulled them down one night after shift. Sat in the back office with a single lamp burning, flipping through old arrest logs and case files. Most of it was boring. Petty theft, drunks, the usual parade of small-town sins. But then I found it, a file stamped in red. Deceased in custody. The date was over 30 years ago. A man named Richard Hale. I read the first line and felt a chill run through me. Inmate was discovered deceased in Cell 4, apparent hanging. My mouth went dry. I forced myself to keep reading. According to the report, Hale had been picked up on charges of assault. Mid-30s local man, known for temper and drinking. Nothing unusual about him, at least not on paper. But sometime during the night, he'd torn a strip from his bedsheet, tied it to the bars, and hanged himself. That should have been the end of it. Tragic, sure, but not unheard of. Except the deputy who wrote the report noted something strange. Before his death, Hale had been acting odd, talking to himself, laughing when no one else was in the room, complaining of whispers in the dark. The hairs on my arms stood up. I read the line again and again. Whispers in the dark. I set the report aside, but the file wasn't done with me yet. There were photocopies of torn notebook pages. Notes Hale had left behind, most were scribbles. Messy words that barely made sense, but one line was underlined 3 times, hard enough to tear the paper. They walked the floor. They never stopped walking. I felt my stomach twist. I saw that figure pacing in my head, the same motion caught again and again on the recordings. Another page showed half-finished sentences. They talk, but not to me. They wait in the corners. If you hear them too, it's already too late. I had to set the pages down, my hands trembling. The words blurred, like my own mind didn't want me to read them anymore. I leaned back, staring at the shadows on the office wall. My thoughts kept circling the same truth. This wasn't new. Whatever was in Cell 4, it had been there long before Thomas Ray ever sat on that bench, and Richard Hale hadn't been strong enough to survive it. The more I thought about it, the heavier it felt. Like Cell 4 wasn't just a room, but a trap. A place built to catch something that didn't belong here. The next day, I tried asking around town, discreetly. A few older folks remembered Hale. A mean drunk, they said, quick with his fists. Some said the jail softened him, that he wasn't the same after they pulled him out of there. One old woman looked me dead in the eye and told me Hale hadn't killed himself. She said something in that cell had helped him along. I didn't press her. Couldn't. Back at the station, I kept thinking about the notes. About that one line. They walked the floor. That night, I pulled the surveillance again. Same empty cell, same faint shadow pacing back and forth. Watching it felt wrong, like staring into a wound. But then, for just a second, I thought I saw something scratched into the wall. Not graffiti, not marks from age, words. I paused the footage, zoomed in, but the resolution was too poor. Just smudges of darker gray against concrete. Still, my gut told me the words were there. Waiting. I walked back to Cell 4 with a flashlight in hand. My boots echoed on the corridor floor. The deputies stayed behind, pretending not to watch me. I stopped at the bars, shined the light inside. The beam washed over the bench, the cracks, the stains on the concrete, and then I saw them. Scratches, faint, shallow, like someone had pressed metal to stone again and again until the words stuck. Walking. Still walking. The letters were uneven, jagged. Old. I felt cold all over. The notes hadn't been lies. Hale had carved his fear into the very walls. I couldn't stand there any longer. I turned off the flashlight, locked the corridor, and went back to my office. But all night, the words burned in my mind. Walking, still walking. I tried to tell myself it was history. Just history. A sad man who lost his grip, nothing more. But then I'd hear it again, faint and steady. Like boots on concrete, step, step, step. And in those moments, I couldn't help but wonder if Hale hadn't been warning us. Not about his death, but about what never left Cell 4. The worst part wasn't the whispers anymore. It wasn't the pacing, or the shape caught on the recordings, or even the words carved into the wall by a man long dead. The worst part was knowing I'd never look at Cell 4 and see an empty room again. I'd tried to fight it, tried to pretend, told the deputies it was all just tricks of the mind, echoes, shadows, electrical interference on the cameras. But lies don't last long when you're lying to yourself. I knew, we all knew. And so when the last night came, when it was my turn to sit the watch alone, I carried that weight with me like a sentence I'd already been handed down. I didn't even bother turning on the radio, didn't bring coffee or paperwork to pass the time. I just sat in my office with the door open, listening to the hum of the lights and the distant creak of the building settling. Every sound felt sharper, Every tick of the clock louder than it should have been. And underneath it all, faint and steady, I thought I could hear the pacing start. Step, step, step. I told myself not to look. Not yet, but I knew I would. Curiosity is a cruel thing. It eats at you until you can't help but peel back the curtain even if you hate what you find. Around midnight, I stood. My legs felt heavy like I was wading through water. The corridor stretched out darker than usual. The kind of dark that doesn't seem natural. I walked past the first 3 cells. Empty. Silent. My footsteps echoed too loud, bouncing back at me like they didn't belong to me anymore. Then I reached cell 4. The bars were the same. The bench, the cracks, the stains on the concrete, all of it the same as I'd seen 100 times before. But the cell wasn't empty. It never was. At first, I thought I saw him again. Thomas Ray, sitting on the bench, head tilted, that faint twitch of a smile. But when I blinked, the shape shifted. It wasn't Thomas anymore. It was Richard Hale, the man who hanged himself. His face dark, swollen, eyes bulging as if the noose were still around his neck. I stumbled back, my heart slamming in my chest. But then Hale was gone and someone else was there. A boy. Couldn't have been older than 16. Knees drawn to his chest, rocking back and forth, lips moving in a silent prayer. Then he was gone too. One after another, the cell filled with them. Faces I'd never seen before, but all of them broken in some way. A woman with wrists slit open, blood dripping that left no stain. A man banging his head against the wall until his skull caved in. A soldier in torn fatigues, pacing, each one faded into the next, like smoke curling into different shapes. But the cell was never empty. My stomach twisted. My hands gripped the bars before I even realized it. The cold steel grounded me, but it also chained me there. I whispered, "What do you want?" The figures didn't answer, but the whispers came, rising all around me, flooding the corridor. Some were sharp, cutting into my ears. Others soft, intimate, brushing against the back of my neck, and beneath it all, a rhythm. Step, step, step. I covered my ears, but it didn't matter. The voices were inside me now, curling through my thoughts, digging into the cracks of my mind. One word kept forming clearer than the rest. Stay. I staggered back, nearly falling. My chest ached, and my throat was dry as dust. I wanted to run. God help me, I wanted to run out the doors and never come back. But I couldn't. Something in that cell held me there. Not with chains, not with force. With understanding. I realized then what Thomas meant when he said, "They're not with me. They're with you." It wasn't about him. It was about all of us. We'd been feeding it for years without knowing. Every drunk we threw in there, every fight, every night someone sat alone in the dark hearing things they couldn't explain. The cell wasn't cursed. It was hungry. Hungry for company. Hungry for attention. Hungry for anyone who would listen long enough to never leave. And now it wanted me. I don't remember leaving the corridor. One second I was at the bars, the next I was back in my office, slamming the door shut, turning the lock even though I knew it wouldn't help. The whispers followed. Not as loud but steady, always steady. Step, step, step. I sat there until the sun came up, my gun in my hand, though I knew a bullet wouldn't matter. When morning light finally spilled through the blinds, the voices faded, as if they'd only borrowed the night. The deputies found me pale and shaking. I told them nothing, just waved them off and went home. But even there, in my own house, I couldn't escape it. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the pacing in the hallway outside my bedroom. Slow and steady, like boots on concrete. My dog won't go near that part of the house anymore. He just growls at the door and hides under the bed. Other times, I see movement in the corner of my eye. A figure sitting or standing or rocking slowly in the dark. And always, when I close my eyes, I hear the word again. Stay. I know now the truth I didn't want to face. Cell 4 was never empty. Not 30 years ago, not last week, not ever. And once you see that, once you hear it, you carry it with you. The cell isn't a place anymore. It's a presence, a weight, a shadow stitched to my bones. I was the sheriff once, a man of law, a man of order. But none of that matters now. What matters is this. I don't think I'll ever walk free of Cell 4. Because the cell, it's never empty. Not for me. Not anymore. It was late autumn when the call came in, the kind of night where the air feels brittle, where even your breath comes out in sharp little clouds that hang too long before they vanish. I was halfway through a lukewarm cup of coffee when the dispatcher's voice came over the radio. Calm but tight. "Sheriff, we got another one. Caller says they see smoke out by Fire Road." I froze. Fire Road. That stretch of dirt track had been empty for years. Nothing but woods, farmland, and the old farmhouse that everyone in town swore was cursed. It hadn't been lived in since the early 90s, and the only folks who ever went out there were kids looking to scare themselves or drifters passing through. But the calls, they kept coming. Smoke, strange lights, shadows in the windows. We'd send a deputy. Sometimes I went myself, but there was never anything there. The place sat heavy and quiet, broken windows staring out like dead eyes. Still, this time something felt different. I grabbed my jacket, told dispatch I was en route, and drove into the night. The closer I got to Fire Road, the thinner the air seemed to feel. The trees grew tight along the shoulders, branches reaching over the dirt path like hands. My headlights caught nothing but trunks and shadows. And then, faint but real, I saw it. Smoke. It rose in a thin column above the trees, curling pale against the night sky. Not the thick, angry kind of a burning house, but a steady drift, like something smoldering. My grip on the wheel tightened. For the first time in years of answering calls about that farmhouse, I felt sure something was actually burning. I pulled up to the gate. The old no trespassing sign hung rusted and bent, swaying in the breeze. Beyond it, the house stood like a skeleton. 2 stories of rotting wood and sagging roof, windows black and empty, but the smoke was real. I could smell it now, sweet, acrid, like wet wood left too long in a fire pit. I radioed in. "This is Sheriff. I've got visible smoke. Approaching the property now." My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded smaller. I walked up the overgrown path, boots crunching on gravel and dead leaves. The closer I came, the thicker the smoke got. Not choking, not blinding, just present, wrapping around me, curling into my jacket, carrying a faint warmth that didn't belong to the cold night. The porch sagged under my weight. Boards groaned like a warning. I pushed the door open. It gave without a fight, swinging into the dark. Inside, the air was thicker. The smoke clung low, curling along the floorboards and creeping up the walls. I expected to see flames, embers, something glowing in the shadows. But there was nothing. Just the house, dust, cobwebs, broken furniture, wallpaper peeling in strips, and that smell. I coughed into my sleeve, shining my flashlight around. The beam cut through the haze, catching pieces of the past frozen in decay. An old rocking chair tipped on its side, a shattered mirror leaning against the wall, and footprints. At first I thought they were mine, but no. These were smaller, bare. They trailed through the dust, weaving from room to room, pressed deep enough that they couldn't have been old. I followed them. My boots felt heavy, like I was sinking into the house itself. Each step echoed too loud, swallowed too fast by the walls. The prints led me to the kitchen. The stove was rusted, the counters mold-stained. But on the center of the floor sat a circle of blackened wood, charred, as if someone had built a fire right there on the boards. The smoke curled up from it, faint but steady. I knelt, running a hand near the ashes. They weren't warm, not even close, yet the smoke kept rising, as if the fire never needed heat to burn. My radio cracked. A burst of static, sharp in the silence. "Sheriff? You copy?" I jumped, nearly dropping the flashlight. My hands shook as I pressed the button. "Yeah, I'm here." The line hissed. Then silence. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stand. The footprints didn't stop at the ashes. They circled it, over and over, like someone had paced around the fire for hours. Then they led to the stairs. I should have stopped there, called it in, waited for backup. But something in me felt pulled upward. Like if I didn't follow those prints, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. The stairs creaked under me, each step threatening to give way. My flashlight beam jittered across the walls, catching glimpses of torn wallpaper and graffiti scrawled by trespassers. Halfway up, I heard it. A creak. Not mine. It came from above, slow and deliberate. The sound of weight shifting on old wood. I froze. Breath caught in my chest. My hand tightened around the flashlight until my knuckles ached. The smoke thickened as I reached the top landing. The air pressed heavy in my lungs, though still there was no heat, no flame. Just that endless smell of burning. The footprints led into a bedroom. I pushed the door open. It was almost empty. Just a bed frame with no mattress. A dresser collapsed in on itself. The floor was coated in dust, except where the prints crossed the room and stopped at the far corner. I shone the light there. The wall was black. Burned from floor to ceiling, the wood scarred and blistered. And yet there was no fire damage anywhere else. Just that one corner, as if the flames had lived only there. And in the middle of the charred wood, scratched deep into the wall, were words, "Still burning." My stomach dropped. My skin prickled cold. I backed away, heart pounding, when I heard it again. That creak. That slow step, but this time it wasn't above me. It was right there in the room. The flashlight flickered, and in the brief sputter of darkness, I thought I saw movement. A shape in the corner, crouched low, smoke curling off its shoulders. The light came back, and the corner was empty. The footprints, though, they weren't just in front of me anymore. They were behind me, too. Leading out the door. Leading back down the stairs. I didn't think. I just ran. The house groaned with every step, the walls closing in, the smoke clawing at my throat. My boots slammed down the stairs, across the kitchen, out onto the porch. I didn't stop until I was back at my cruiser. Chest heaving, lungs raw. When I turned, the farmhouse loomed against the sky, silent and dark. No smoke now. Not a trace, just as it always was. I sat there for a long time, gripping the wheel, staring at that house, and I realized something. The calls were never wrong. People had seen smoke. People had smelled it. Maybe they'd even seen that shape crouched in the corner. The house hadn't stopped burning. Not really. It had just learned how to burn without fire. I told myself I wouldn't go back. After that first night, I swore I'd keep my distance from Fire Road. I wrote it up as smoke with no source, left the report vague, and closed the book on it. But the house didn't leave me alone. For weeks, the smell lingered. That same acrid, sweet burn that clung to my jacket that night, it followed me. I smelled it in the cruiser. I smelled it in my office. Some nights I even woke up coughing, convinced my room was filled with smoke, only to find nothing there. The worst part wasn't the smell, though. It was the dreams. I'd dream of footsteps circling me, small bare feet moving in the dark. I'd hear them shuffle through dust, padding across wooden floors, always just out of sight. And in the distance, faint, like it was buried deep in the walls, I'd hear laughter. Children's laughter. Not playful, not joyful. The kind of laughter that comes when someone is keeping a secret from you. Eventually, I gave up pretending I could ignore it. I drove back to the farmhouse, alone. The night was colder than before, the sky empty of stars. The house sat there like it had been waiting for me. Quiet, hollow, but alive in a way I could feel more than see. Inside, the smell hit me immediately, stronger now. It didn't drift, it pressed. Like the walls themselves were breathing out the smoke. I followed the same path as last time. Through the kitchen, past the circle of ashes, and up the stairs. Every step felt heavier. The footprints in the dust were gone. Or maybe they had never been there at all, but I didn't need them this time. The house pulled me where it wanted me to go. I reached the top landing, the beam of my flashlight jittering across warped wallpaper. The air was thicker up there. It tasted bitter, like charcoal ground between my teeth. And then I saw the door. It was cracked open just enough to notice. At the end of the hall, second door on the left. The smell was strongest there. I pushed it open with the edge of my boot. It was a child's room, or at least it had been once. The walls were blackened near the ceiling, soot clinging to the corners. The floor was warped, the boards darkened like they'd soaked up smoke for decades. But what froze me in place wasn't the damage. It was the toys. They sat on the floor, arranged in neat, deliberate rows. Dolls, stuffed animals, wooden blocks, each one upright, facing the door. They weren't burned, not a mark on them. No ash, no soot, no dust, just clean, whole, and waiting. I shone my light across their faces. Porcelain dolls with glass eyes that caught the beam. A ragged teddy bear with its seams stretched tight. Little tin cars lined bumper to bumper. They were all watching me. My throat went dry. I took a step back, my boots squeaking against the warped floor. That sound, it echoed wrong. Too loud, bouncing back at me like the room didn't want any other noise. And then, faintly, I heard it. The laughter. It rose from the corners of the room, slipping out from under the bed, seeping down from the ceiling. High-pitched, soft and cruel. The sound of children giggling in the dark. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to speak. "Who's there?" The laughter cut off. The silence that followed was worse. I crouched down, sweeping the flashlight across the floor. The beam passed over the toys again. Their positions hadn't changed, but the teddy bear, its head was tilted now, just slightly, toward me. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The light shook in my hand, flickering across the walls. My breath came ragged, fogging in the beam, and then I saw them, handprints, smeared across the soot-black walls, dozens of them, small and gray. Some pressed high near the ceiling, others low to the floor, all the same size. Children's hands, frozen in ash. As I watched, one of the prints darkened. Right before my eyes, the gray turned blacker, deeper, as if a hand had just pressed there again. I backed toward the door, the flashlight still trained on the wall. The laughter returned, but this time it wasn't faint. It was right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just the row of toys. Except the teddy bear was sitting closer now, closer to my boots. I swear to God I hadn't heard it move. I raised the light again, sweeping the room, trying to anchor myself in something real. My voice came out shaking. "You're not here! This house is empty! You're not here!" The words didn't help. If anything, the laughter grew louder, and then, clear as day, a small voice whispered from the dark. Still burning. My chest locked tight. That was what had been scratched into the wall downstairs. I remembered it too well. The same phrase, the same weight in those words. Still burning. The toys shifted. I didn't see them move, but I heard it. The scrape of wood blocks dragging across the floor. The squeak of a toy car's wheels. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran. Through the hall, down the stairs, boots slamming against wood that threatened to splinter. The smoke chased me, clinging to my clothes, filling my lungs. I didn't stop until I was outside, gulping in the cold night air. The house loomed behind me, quiet again. No laughter, no voices, just me and the steady sound of my heartbeat in my ears. I climbed into the cruiser, hands trembling on the wheel. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at that upstairs window, the one where the children's room was. And maybe it was the smoke playing tricks on me. Maybe it was my eyes adjusting to the dark. But I swear, I saw something move behind the glass, small shapes, standing in perfect rows, watching. I thought I could keep it to myself. After the children's room, I didn't file a report, didn't mention the toys, the laughter, the voice whispering those two words. I told myself if I kept quiet, it would fade. Maybe the dreams would loosen their grip. Maybe the smoke would finally lift from my clothes. But the house doesn't let go. It follows you. And it wasn't long before I realized I wasn't the only one carrying it. It started small. The old man who runs the gas station on Main caught me one morning, said I looked tired. He asked if I'd been out near Fire Road. The way he said it, casual, like asking about the weather, but his eyes didn't match his tone. They were sharp, watching me close. I told him I had, that I'd gotten a call about smoke. He nodded once. almost like he'd expected it. Then he said something that still rings in my head. You'll start hearing them now. I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and walked away. That same week, 2 more people brought it up. Not directly, but close enough. A woman came into the station to report trespassers. Said she saw lights in the farmhouse windows at night like lanterns swinging back and forth. Said she heard voices too. Screams. High-pitched, thin, carrying across the fields long after midnight. She'd lived out there her whole life, and she swore she never believed the stories. Not until she saw it herself. I tried to press her for details, but she cut me off. Told me she wouldn't talk about it again. Not in daylight, not ever. And she left. The third was a farmer down near the ridge. He said he kept finding dead animals near his fence. Crows, rabbits, once even a dog. All of them blackened, singed around the edges, like they'd been pulled out of a fire. He said the smell carried on the wind some nights, that same bittersweet smoke. He asked if I smelled it too. I lied. Told him no. But the truth was, I smelled it everywhere. It clung to me like a second skin. Some nights I swore I could see it, curling in the air of my own bedroom, seeping into my lungs while I slept. The more I listened, the more stories came. Whispers passed like warnings. People said they saw children in the upstairs window, standing still, lined up like dolls. Others claimed they heard laughter from the woods when no one was there. And always, they talked about the fire. Not flames you could see, but a fire that never went out. One that lived inside the house, burning invisible, feeding on whatever wandered too close. I started asking questions. At first, folks answered me. They told me about the family who used to live there. The ones who lost everything in the blaze. A mother, a father, 3 children. Only the father made it out. The others, they said their screams were heard all the way to the road, but the father, he never spoke of it. He stayed in town a few months after, drinking himself into a hole, muttering about the fire still burning in the walls. Then one day he disappeared. Some say he left for good. Others swear he went back into the house. After a while, though, people stopped answering me. The more I asked, the more doors closed. The more voices lowered. The same words kept coming up. Don't dig too deep. Leave it alone. Some even told me flat out, don't bring that house into town, but by then it was too late. The house was already in me. One night I drove out to the diner on the edge of town. It was nearly empty. Just me, the waitress, and an older woman sitting at the counter. She must have heard me asking questions because when the waitress went to the back, the woman leaned over and whispered, "You know why they call it Fire Road?" I told her I figured it was because of the fire. She shook her head. No, the fire came after. That road had the name long before the house burned. Folks called it that because the ground out there glowed some nights, like coals under the dirt. Nobody knew why. Her eyes darted toward the door, like she was afraid someone might hear. Then she said, quieter still, "The house didn't just catch fire. It was born from it." Before I could ask what she meant, she dropped a few bills on the counter and left without another word. That night, lying awake, those words twisted in my head. Born from fire. The dreams came back harder after that. I'd see the children again, their faces blank, their eyes empty, standing in rows in that soot-covered room. Behind them, smoke poured from the walls, filling the space until only the words carved into the wood were left visible. Still burning. I'd wake up gasping, my sheets damp with sweat, my throat raw. The next day, I went to the library, dug through old newspapers, town records, anything I could find. Most of it was the same. A house fire, tragic loss, cause unknown. But one clipping stood out. It was from years before the fire, a piece about neighbors filing complaints. They said the family was strange, that the children never went to school, that some nights lights burned in the windows until dawn, flickering like flames. One line in particular stopped me cold. A neighbor had sworn she saw the children standing outside at midnight, holding hands, their faces lit orange like they were standing in firelight. But there was nothing there, no fire, just the glow. The article brushed it off, said it was hysteria. But I knew better. Every story I'd heard, every smell, every dream, it all fit. The fire didn't start with the blaze that killed them. It started long before. It had always been there, waiting. The house didn't burn. It burns even now. The more I learned, the worse it got. I couldn't drive down Main Street without someone looking away from me, whispering when I passed. It was like carrying a sickness no one wanted to catch. One night, I left the cruiser running outside the station, just sat there with the engine, idling, staring at the dark line of trees that led to Fire Road. I thought about all the stories, all the warnings, all the voices telling me to leave it alone. And I realized something. They weren't afraid of the house. They were afraid of me. Because I'd gone inside. Because I'd heard the laughter, seen the toys, smelled the smoke that never stops. They knew. Even if I didn't want to admit it yet, once you step through that door, you bring it back with you, and it never lets you go. I'd heard the stories. I'd listened to the whispers. I'd even walked through the rooms myself, seen the toys, smelled the smoke, felt the laughter crawling under my skin. But nothing prepared me for the night the house caught fire again. It was past midnight when the call came in. A man driving the back road swore he saw flames tearing through the farmhouse, lighting up the sky. He said the roof was glowing orange, sparks showering into the tree line. My first thought was simple. This was it. After all these years, after all the warnings, the damn place was finally burning to the ground. I told dispatch I was heading out, though part of me wanted to keep driving the other way. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I didn't turn on the siren. Didn't need to. The night itself was loud enough, my heartbeat pounding louder with each mile closer. When I turned down Fire Road, I saw it. The sky pulsed with light, orange, red, gold. The treetops glowed like embers. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. It wasn't headlights. It wasn't some reflection. It was fire. The house was burning. Every window poured light, flames licking high into the night, black smoke rolling from the roof. The kind of blaze that should have roared like a beast, should have cracked wood and shattered glass. But it didn't sound like that. It was quiet. No crash, no howl of burning beams. Just the soft pop of embers and the faint hiss of something smoldering. Almost like the sound a campfire makes when you sit too close. I pulled up to the gate, heart hammering. The cruiser lights swept over the grass, but I didn't cut the engine. I just sat there staring. It was beautiful in a way that made me sick. The fire didn't move wild. It didn't rage. It crawled. It stretched slow across the boards, folding itself up the walls like hands pressing flat. I could see the flames winding along the frame, curling through broken windows like fingers. And through it all, the house stood untouched. I mean untouched. The flames wrapped it, covered it, swallowed it whole. But the wood didn't blacken. The roof didn't collapse. No shingles fell. The paint didn't peel. It burned, and yet it didn't. I climbed out of the car, legs trembling, air already thick with the smell of smoke. But it wasn't choking. It didn't sting my eyes or scorch my throat. It drifted soft and sweet, wrapping around me like it wanted me closer. I should have radioed for backup. I should have grabbed the extinguisher, called the fire department, done something. Anything. Instead, I walked closer. Every step felt wrong, like my boots weren't fully touching the ground. The fire lit the path in a strange, shifting glow. The shadows of the trees bent away, as though they didn't want to get too near. By the time I reached the porch, the flames were pouring through the windows. The boards under my feet should have been blistering hot. They weren't. I reached out. God help me, I reached out, and held my hand near the wall. The fire licked inches from my skin. I should have felt pain. I should have pulled away. But there was no heat. The fire burned bright as daylight, but it didn't burn at all. I stumbled back, my chest tightening. My mind screamed to run, but my body froze, because through the glow I saw movement, shapes, figures pacing inside the windows. Their shadows stretched against the walls, long and twisting, some tall, some small. They moved back and forth, circling each other, pressing hands to the glass, and in the upstairs window, the one I'd stared at so many nights, I saw them. The children, 3 of them, standing side by side. Faces pale, eyes hollow. Their silhouettes wavered in the firelight, but they never moved, never blinked. Just stood there watching me. A sound rose in my ears then. Not laughter this time, screams not loud, not shrill, just steady, layered, endless. A chorus of voices trapped behind the walls, crying out from every room, spilling out through the fire. The ground swayed beneath me, my vision blurred. For a second I thought I'd pass out. Then, just like that, it ended. The flames vanished, one blink and they were gone. No smoke, no light, just the farmhouse standing in the dark. Black windows, silent walls, as if nothing had happened at all. I gasped, lungs pulling air like I'd been drowning. My knees buckled and I caught myself against the gate. My eyes burned, though not from smoke. My throat ached, though no heat had touched me. When I looked again, the windows were empty. The house was still, but I knew what I'd seen. The fire wasn't gone. It had gone back inside. Sleep isn't rest anymore. It's a trap. I close my eyes, thinking I might finally drift off and the house is already there, waiting for me. Sometimes I dream of the dirt road, the trees pressing in close, the headlights carving a weak path through the dark. Sometimes it's the porch, the boards sagging under my boots. Other times, it skips straight to the upstairs window, where the children stand in silence, their eyes hollow and their faces blank. But it always ends the same, with fire. Not fire like you and I know it, not flames that warm or destroy. No, this fire has no heat. It has no mercy. It doesn't eat wood or paint or shingles. It eats me. I wake choking on smoke that isn't there. My throat raw, my chest tight, the taste of ash heavy on my tongue. My sheets smell like they've been hanging beside a bonfire. My clothes reek as if I've spent the night inside the blaze, and yet my house stands untouched. Just me, sweating in the dark, lungs burning. At first I told myself it was stress, lack of sleep. Maybe I'd breathed in too much when I was inside the farmhouse. But that lie doesn't hold anymore, because it's not just me who wakes up coughing. The other night I found footprints in the hallway of my own home. Small, bare feet pressed into the dust, just like the ones I'd followed through the farmhouse. And in my dreams, the children aren't always inside the house anymore. Sometimes they're in my kitchen, sometimes at the foot of my bed. One time, I woke and swore I saw them standing in the corner, smoke curling from their shoulders, their mouths opening wide as if to scream. But when I blinked, they were gone. I don't tell anyone. I can't. People already look at me sideways, already whisper when I walk past. They know I've been inside. They know I've seen the fire, and they're afraid it's clinging to me. Maybe they're right. The dreams get worse. Last night, I dreamed of ashes falling like snow, drifting slow from the ceiling, settling on my arms, my face, my tongue. They tasted bitter, thick, like ground bone. I tried to brush them off, but they clung to my skin, melted into it. When I woke, my pillow was streaked black. I don't own a fireplace. I can't escape it anymore. Whether I'm asleep or awake, the house finds me. I smell it on my clothes. I see it in the corners of my eyes. The smoke curls under doors, slips into drawers, seeps into every crack. Sometimes I hear the laughter again, soft at first, like it's coming from outside, then closer, in the walls, under the floorboards, and sometimes I hear screaming. I tell myself it's the family, the mother, the children. But in my darkest hours, I realize the screams don't sound far away anymore. They sound like they're coming from me, like I'm already inside, burning. I've tried staying awake, drinking coffee until my hands shake, pacing the floor until my legs ache. It doesn't help. Eventually, my body shuts down, and when it does, the house is waiting. It knows I'll come back. It drags me to the same rooms. The kitchen, where the circle of ash smolders without heat. The upstairs bedroom, where the words are carved into the wall. still burning. The children's room, where soot-covered toys sit in their neat rows, untouched by time, untouched by fire. Only now, the toys move. I see them shuffle closer when I look away. Dolls sit upright where I swear they'd fallen. A toy car rolls across the floor on its own, wheels squeaking. The teddy bear, the one with the crooked head, sometimes it sits right in front of me. Too close! Its stitched mouth stretched in something that isn't a smile, and always the children stand in the corner. I ask them what they want. My voice echoes in the dream, weak, shaking, but they never answer. They just stare. And then the fire comes. It seeps through the walls first, glowing faint orange like coals. Then it spreads, crawling along the floorboards, licking the ceiling. The children don't move. The toys don't burn, but I do. I feel it eating me alive. My skin tightening, my lungs searing, my bones cracking in the heat that isn't there. I try to scream, but my voice drowns in smoke. My body collapses, and I feel myself turning to ash. And then I wake, every time. But each time I wake, it takes longer for the feeling to fade. The burn lingers. My skin tingles, red and raw like sunburn. My lips crack as if they've been blistered. My chest hurts deep, like something inside is crumbling. I think the dreams are more than dreams. I think the house is pulling me through, and I don't know how much longer I can fight it. The other night, I drove past Fire Road without meaning to. My hands turned the wheel on their own. My headlights slid over the gate, over the sagging porch, over those black windows that seemed to pulse with light deep inside. I sat there with the engine idling, staring, feeling the smoke curl in my lungs like I'd never left. And for the first time, I thought about going back in, not because I wanted to, but because I think I already belong there. The town has its whispers. The neighbors tell their stories, but I've seen what they won't. I've carried it home into my bed, into my dreams. Maybe that was the house's plan all along. To spread itself one person at a time. To keep burning, even when no fire burns. I don't know if I can stop it. I don't even know if I want to anymore. Because each night, when the dreams come, I hear the children closer. Louder, their laughter sharper, their screams clearer. And in the middle of it all, I hear my own voice joining them. The house is already inside me. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only way the fire keeps burning. Through us, through me, ashes in my dreams, ashes in my lungs, ashes in my mouth. It won't be long now. When I close my eyes tonight, I know where I'll go, and I don't think I'll wake up again. I've lived in this town my whole life. It's the kind of place where nothing ever happens. At least that's what people like to say. But the truth is, things do happen. They just get buried, covered up, forgotten. I didn't believe that until the summer of '98 when I found the body. It was late July, hot enough that the air felt thick, heavy. The sky was the pale white of a bleached sheet, not blue. I'd been out since dawn working the field behind my house. Just me, my hands in the dirt, and the sound of cicadas screaming from the tree line. The field was dry that year. Cornstalks stunted and brittle. I kept glancing at the sky, hoping for rain, but there was nothing. Just heat. My shirt clung to me, my throat raw. I remember thinking, if it doesn't rain soon, we're done for. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a scarecrow. There was this shape lying between two rows of corn, maybe 50 yards out, a dark shape against the dry soil. I kept walking toward it, shading my eyes. My first thought was that some kid had dragged something out here to mess with me. A dummy, maybe? Or some trash blown off the road. But as I got closer, my stomach started to twist. It was a body, a man lying face up in the dirt. His skin was pale, almost gray, clothes torn like he'd been dragged. His eyes were open, staring at the sky. I froze. The world went quiet all of a sudden. Even the cicadas stopped. Or maybe I just couldn't hear them anymore. I stood there for I don't know how long. My hands shook, sweat dripping down my face. I couldn't breathe right. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then something snapped me out of it. I saw a crow swoop down and land a few feet away from the body, pecking at the dirt, edging closer. And I thought, no, that's a man. Someone's son. Someone's father. I can't just leave him there. I forced myself to move. Just a few steps closer, close enough to see the details. His shirt was stained dark across the chest. His lips cracked, skin sunken. He looked dry, like he'd been there longer than a single night. But I swear to God, when I leaned down, I thought I saw his chest rise. Just a little, like a breath. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the row behind me. My throat burned with bile. No, he was dead. He had to be dead. I couldn't think straight. I ran back to the house and called the sheriff's office. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I told them, "There's a body. In my field. You need to send someone quick." The dispatcher asked if I was sure. I said yes, I was sure. She told me to stay put. I couldn't. I kept pacing, looking out the window toward the field, waiting for the deputies. It felt like hours before I heard the crunch of gravel, the sound of 2 cruisers pulling up by the barn. Sheriff Mason got out first. Big man, broad shoulders, always had a calm way about him. He nodded at me, then asked where it was. I pointed, my hands still shaking. "By the far rows. 50 yards out." He told me and his deputy to walk ahead, and we did. I'll never forget the way my stomach dropped when we reached the spot. The body was gone, just gone. The soil was disturbed like something had been there, like something had been dragged. But the man himself, nothing. No clothes, no scraps, no blood. Just dirt, crushed stalks, and silence. The sheriff looked at me hard. "You're sure you saw someone?" I stammered. My mouth was dry. "Yes, I saw him. He was right here. A man, dead. I swear it." The deputy glanced at the sheriff, then back at me. They didn't say much. "Just walk the rows, scanning the ground." Mason bent down, touched the soil. Then he stood up, wiped his hands on his pants. "There's no body here." His voice was steady, like he'd said it 100 times before. I felt this heat rush up my neck. "I'm not crazy. I know what I saw." "He was right here!" The sheriff just nodded slow. Maybe it was an animal. Something big. Coyotes, they drag things. Sometimes they leave shapes in the dirt, but no coyote drags a man and leaves nothing behind. I wanted to argue, to scream, but their faces told me not to. The deputy wouldn't even look at me. Finally, Mason sighed. "Look, we'll file a report. If anything turns up, we'll let you know. But right now, there's nothing we can do." And just like that, they left. I stood in the field alone, staring at that empty patch of dirt. The cicadas had started again, loud and endless. I wanted to tear them out of the trees to make them stop. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. The pale skin, the cracked lips, those dead eyes staring at the sky. And worse than all of it, I kept hearing the faint sound of breath. That little rise and fall in his chest, like he wasn't fully gone. By morning, I convinced myself maybe the sheriff was right. Maybe it was a trick of the heat. Maybe exhaustion, dehydration. Maybe my mind filled in the rest. But when I went back to the field the next day, I found something I hadn't seen before. In the dirt, just beyond the rows, there was a footprint. Bare. Human. The toes pressed deep into the soil, pointing toward the tree line. I know what I saw, and I know. He walked away. I didn't talk about the body for a while. After that first day, after the sheriff walked away and left me standing alone in the dirt, I tried to bury it in my head. Tell myself it wasn't real. That maybe I had seen a trick of light, or maybe the heat was playing games with me. My mind wanted it to be anything but the truth. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a trick. I knew what I saw. The days that followed were quiet, but not in a comforting way. It was the kind of quiet that presses on your chest. The field felt different. Every time I went out there, I felt watched. Like the rows were hiding something. The cicadas didn't sound the same anymore. They weren't background noise. They were screams ringing in my ears, reminding me that the world wasn't right. By the end of the week, I wasn't the only one. Sheriff Mason came back. It was early morning when his truck pulled up beside my barn. I was sitting on the porch, half awake, drinking coffee. He climbed out, his boots crunching on gravel, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked unsettled. He asked if we could walk. So we did. Out past the barn, through the rows, back to that same patch of dirt where I'd found the body, the place I'd been avoiding. When we got there, he stopped, shoved his hands in his pockets, and wouldn't look at me right away. His jaw was tight, his eyes sunken. Finally, he said, "I saw it too." I didn't answer at first. I just stared at him, trying to understand what he meant. Then he said it again, softer this time. "Out here, in this same spot. I came by 2 nights ago. Couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what you told me, so I drove out. Figured I'd check for myself." His voice cracked a little, and that shook me more than anything. I'd never seen him crack before. "Not once. There was a body," he whispered. My chest tightened. My mouth went dry. "What did it look like?" He hesitated, looked down at the dirt. When he lifted his head, I'll never forget the look in his eyes. They were wide, bloodshot, like he'd been carrying something too heavy. It was me. I didn't understand at first. I thought he meant it figuratively, like the body looked familiar or he felt some kind of kinship with it. But no. He meant exactly what he said. "It was me," he repeated, louder this time, lying there in the dirt. Face pale, eyes open. Same clothes I was wearing that night. Same everything, like I was looking at my own corpse. He ran a hand over his mouth, shaking his head like he was trying to get rid of the memory. I stood there for maybe a minute. Couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then it was gone. Just like you said. Disappeared. Nothing left but dirt. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The wind pushed through the corn stalks, dry and brittle. The sound made my skin crawl. Finally, I said, "Why didn't you tell me right away?" He gave me a look that cut through me. "Would you have believed me?" "The truth is, I wouldn't have." Not if he hadn't dismissed me first. Not if I hadn't already seen it myself. After that, something changed in Mason. He wasn't the same sheriff anymore. He started showing up at my place more often, sometimes late at night. Sometimes he'd just sit in his truck with the lights off, parked at the edge of my field. Watching. I asked him once what he was looking for. He just said, "I don't want it sneaking up on me again." One night, I went out there and stood by his truck. He looked tired, worn down. His hat was on the dashboard, his face buried in his hands. He told me he kept dreaming about it, the body, but not just seeing it lying in the dirt. He dreamed about standing over it, bending down, reaching for it. And every time he touched it, the body would open its eyes, and then it would sit up. He said the worst part wasn't that it looked like him. The worst part was that when it opened its mouth, it spoke in his voice. But the words weren't words he'd ever say. "They're not finished," it would tell him, over and over. "They're not finished." He said he'd wake up soaked in sweat, his throat raw from screaming. His wife started sleeping in the other room. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? I'd seen the body once. He'd seen it again. And now it was inside his head. The next day, I went out to the field alone. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe I wanted to prove to myself that it wasn't real. But standing there in that patch of dirt, I felt something I hadn't felt before. It wasn't just dread. It was recognition. Like the earth itself was holding a memory, something buried beneath the soil. Something waiting. I crouched down, touched the dirt where the body had been. The ground was cool, almost damp, even though the sun had been burning all day. And when I closed my eyes, just for a moment, I swear I felt something breathing underneath. I jerked back, heart hammering, and I didn't go near that spot again. But Mason did. Almost every night. The last time I saw him there, he didn't notice me watching from the porch. He was standing in the rows, flashlight off, just staring down at the dirt. His lips were moving, whispering something I couldn't hear. And when he finally turned back toward his truck, his face looked different. Not scared anymore. Not broken, it looked calm, like he'd accepted something. When I asked him the next day what he'd been doing out there, he just smiled a little. Not a friendly smile, more like a secret. Then he said, "It's not just me. You'll see." The way he said it chilled me to the bone, because deep down, I knew he was right. The sheriff stopped talking about it after a while. One morning he came by, sat on my porch and told me plain, "We're putting this to rest." His voice was steady again, the way it used to be. Not cracked, not shaking. But the way his eyes avoided mine told me different. He said he dug a hole, out at the far edge of the field near the tree line. He told me he'd buried the body there, deep enough so it wouldn't come back. I wanted to ask him how. How do you bury something that disappears? How do you put to rest something that shouldn't exist in the first place? But I didn't. Because the way he said it, I knew he believed it, and maybe I wanted to believe it too. That night, I lay in bed listening to the wind scrape against the house. I tried to tell myself it was over. The body was gone. The soil was closed, but I couldn't shake the thought. If the body vanished in front of both of us, how could he bury it? The next day, I walked out to the tree line. The air was heavy, damp. The cicadas were quieter than usual, which made it worse somehow. And there it was, a patch of fresh dirt, uneven, too dark against the pale dust of the field. I crouched down, pressed my hand to it. Cold. The soil felt looser than it should have. Like it had been dug and filled and dug again. I told myself to leave it, to trust the sheriff. But that night I woke to a sound. It was faint at first, like someone shifting their weight on wooden floorboards. But it wasn't inside the house. It was outside, farther. I got up, went to the window that looked out over the field. The moon was bright enough that I could see the rows clearly. The soil was moving. That patch by the tree line, it was rising, swelling like something underneath was pushing to get out. I stumbled back, my chest tight. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't open the door. I didn't go out there. I just watched. After a few minutes, the ground went still again. The next morning, the patch of soil looked smooth, like nothing had happened. When Mason came by later, I told him what I saw. He listened, jaw tight, arms crossed. He didn't call me crazy. He didn't dismiss it like he did the first time. Instead, he said, "That's why I keep going back." I didn't ask what he meant until later. Until I saw his truck out there again, long after midnight, parked at the tree line. I walked out, flashlight in hand, and found him standing by the disturbed soil. Shovel in one hand, gun in the other. He looked at me like I wasn't supposed to be there. Then he said, "Every night it rises." "I have to put it back down," he dug. Right in front of me, sweat rolling off him, his breathing ragged. And when the hole was open enough, I saw it. The body. Only it wasn't pale anymore, not sunken. It looked fresher, like it hadn't been in the ground long at all. And worse, the face. It was his again, but not dead this time, not fully. The eyes moved. The mouth twitched, pulling at the dirt. I turned away, bile in my throat. I didn't want to see more. I didn't want to hear, but I couldn't stop myself. Because when Mason leaned down, the body whispered. I didn't hear all of it, just enough. Words muffled through soil, but the voice was his own. They're not finished. The same words he'd told me from his dreams. Mason shoved dirt back over it, quick, frantic, muttering under his breath the whole time. His face was pale with sweat, lips trembling. When he was done, he dropped the shovel, leaned on it like he was about to collapse. He looked at me, finally, and said, "You didn't see anything. Do you understand? Nothing. This stays here," I wanted to argue, to tell him we needed help, that this was bigger than us. But the way he looked at me, like he'd shoot me before letting me speak another word, I stayed quiet. So I nodded, and that was the last real conversation we had. After that, he stopped coming by the house. Stopped nodding when we crossed paths in town. But at night, I still saw his truck out there, parked at the edge of my field. Sometimes the headlights were on. Sometimes they weren't, and the dirt kept shifting. I started hearing it too. From my porch, the faint scrape of soil being pushed aside, like fingers clawing upward. Some nights I thought I saw shapes in the rows, figures just standing there, too still, too tall. But when I blinked, they were gone. The sheriff never explained. He never asked for help. He just kept digging, night after night, putting the body back down, covering it again. Until one morning, his truck wasn't there. I walked out to the patch of dirt. The shovel was lying beside it, blade snapped, handle splintered. The ground was open, freshly torn, and Mason was gone. The only thing left was the soil, rising, shifting, breathing. I don't go out there anymore. I can't. But I hear it every night, the scrape of dirt, the whisper in the wind. And sometimes, when the moon is bright and the cicadas fall quiet, I swear I hear his voice, not calling for help, but calling me by name. I worked dispatch for the sheriff's department for almost 15 years. Most nights were quiet. Calls about livestock loose on the road, teenagers drinking in the quarry, neighbors fighting over fence lines. That was the kind of work I knew. Nothing big, nothing that stuck with you after your shift ended. But in the summer of 2004, something changed. It started on a Thursday night. I remember because the station was nearly empty. Just me at the desk, the coffee pot hissing behind me, and the soft hum of the radios. I always kept one ear tuned to the sheriff's frequency, even though he and the deputies usually checked in on schedule. Routine kept me sane. That night, around 1:13 a.m., the routine broke. The static popped first. Not unusual. Sometimes a storm in the distance would make the signal crackle, but the sky was clear. Then a voice cut through. "Hello? Sheriff, can you hear me?" It was faint, broken by static, but the tone was desperate, panicked. I straightened in my chair and pressed the receiver. "This is dispatch." "Identify yourself," the voice came again. A man's voice. "Please, please, I need help. He's in my house." The hairs on my arms lifted. The voice was familiar. "Sir, what's your name?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. The answer made my blood run cold. "Mark Ellison." I froze. My hand slipped from the mic because Mark Ellison had been dead for 3 years. I knew that for certain. I'd taken the call the night he shot himself in his garage. His wife had found him. I'd sent the deputies the ambulance. I'd even gone to the funeral. I remembered the way his daughter clung to her mother's dress, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. But here he was, his voice spilling out of the radio like it was live, like he'd just picked up a phone and dialed me. My throat went dry. I forced myself to respond. "Mark, this is dispatch. Where are you?" The static hissed, long and heavy. Then, "Please, he's coming up the stairs." "I can't." The transmission cut off. Dead air. I sat frozen, staring at the radio. I thought maybe someone was playing a cruel trick. Maybe one of the deputies messing with me. But the fear in that voice was too raw, too real. I wrote down the time, the words I'd heard, and logged it like I would any other call. But I didn't send a unit. How could I? The man was gone. Buried. I tried to tell myself it was some kind of signal bleed, maybe an old recording bouncing back through the airwaves. I'd heard of strange things like that happening. Radio ghosts, they called it. But deep down, I knew better. The next night, it happened again. Same time. Same frequency. This time it was a woman's voice. "Dispatch? Please. Oh God, please, I don't want to die." My heart pounded as I picked up the receiver. "Identify yourself." The reply came through, broken, almost drowned in static. "It's Anna. Please, I'm..." The rest of the words fell into a rush of white noise. But I'd heard enough. Anna Torres. Another name I knew. Another name that shouldn't have been possible. She'd been killed in a car crash on Route 16. I'd taken that call too. I remembered the sound of twisted metal in the background, her breath rattling as she spoke her last words before the line went dead. Now she was back on the radio. I sat there, frozen again, my finger hovering over the receiver but too scared to press it. Her voice kept breaking in and out, begging for help, begging not to be left alone. Then silence. That night I didn't log the call. I couldn't. I just sat in the chair long after my shift ended, staring at the empty air, listening for static that never came. By the third night, I was shaking before I even walked into the building. My coffee spilled from the tremor in my hands as I unlocked the door. And sure enough, right after 1 in the morning, the static popped again. Only this time, the voice was clearer, stronger. "Hello? This is Officer Henry Mason. Dispatch, do you read me?" I nearly dropped the receiver. Sheriff Mason had been gone almost a year. His truck had been found abandoned at the edge of Miller's Field. No body ever recovered. My throat clenched. My hands felt numb. "Sheriff?" My voice cracked as I pressed the receiver. "Is that you?" Static filled the line. Then, "I'm lost. It's dark out here. Can you send someone?" His voice was the same as I remembered. Calm, steady, except this time there was something under it. A strain. Like he was forcing the words out, I whispered into the mic. "Where are you?" The answer came slow. Too slow. Still in the field. Then silence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the radio, my chest tight. It wasn't just random voices anymore. It was people I knew. People tied to me. People tied to this place. The worst part was I could hear the truth in them. The breaths, the panic, the pleading. These weren't recordings. They were alive in those moments, reliving them. Calling out for help I couldn't give. I didn't sleep that week. I'd go home, lie in bed, and every time the wind rattled the windows, I swore I heard voices under it. Whispers bleeding through the night, begging, crying, and always at the edge of it all, the sheriff's voice, calm, calling me back to the field. By the end of the week, I stopped questioning if it was real. The question became, what if they weren't calling from somewhere? What if they were calling me to somewhere? I tried to ignore the voices after that first week. I told myself if I didn't answer, they'd stop. Radios pick up all kinds of noise, stray signals, bleed from other frequencies, even echoes of old transmissions. That's what I told myself, but deep down, I knew. The radio wasn't broken. It wanted me to listen. The calls didn't come every night, but when they did, they came at the same time. Just after 1 in the morning, the static would hiss, then a voice would slip through. Always someone dead, always someone from here. At first, the voices were scattered. Pleas for help, cries of panic. But then they changed. They started giving directions. I'll never forget the first time. It was a woman's voice, soft, shaky. At first, I thought it was Anna again. But this voice was older, raspier. She said, North Road, 2 miles past the creek. Turn by the split tree. Then silence. I wrote it down without thinking, my pen scratching fast against the logbook. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me felt like if I didn't write it, I'd forget, and the forgetting would be worse. The next day, I drove out there. The directions were exact. I found the split tree just where she said, one trunk twisting off from the other like broken bones, and beyond it, a field. Overgrown, tall grass swallowing what looked like the outline of a foundation. Concrete cracked, weeds pushing through. I knew the place. It was the Miller house, or what was left of it. The house had burned down back in 1976. Whole family inside. No one made it out. Folks said it was faulty wiring, but I'd heard other stories too. Rumors of things done in that house. Things never written down. Standing there, I felt the weight of it. The silence of the field. The way the ground still smelled faintly of smoke, even after all those years. I drove back without getting out of the truck, but the voices didn't stop. 2 nights later, another one came through. A man this time. His voice was rough, broken, like he'd been screaming before he spoke. Old Quarry Road, mile marker 9, turn left, follow the dirt path. The words cut in and out, but I caught enough to know where he meant. I didn't go that night, but I couldn't resist the next morning, and sure enough, the directions were real. The dirt path led down into the quarry. I hadn't been there since I was a kid, when the older boys used to dare each other to swim in the black water. But as I stood at the edge, I remembered. A boy drowned here in '82. I remembered the search, the divers pulling him up. His body bloated and gray. And now here I was again, standing where it happened, hearing his voice echo in my head. I started keeping a map after that. Every time a voice came through, I marked it, one after another, the burned house, the quarry, the old bridge where a woman jumped, the stretch of woods where a deputy was shot during a traffic stop. They weren't random. They were all places where death had left a scar. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? The deputies already joked that I was married to the radios. If I told them the dead were calling me, they'd laugh me out of the station. But the more places I marked, the harder it was to sleep, because it felt like a pattern, like the voices were leading me somewhere. One night, I pressed the receiver against my better judgment. My voice shook as I spoke. Why are you telling me this? What do you want? For a long time, there was nothing. Just the low hiss of static. Then a whisper, low and sharp, come find us. I dropped the mic. My hands cold, sweat stinging my eyes. After that, the calls came clearer, stronger. They weren't just names and pleas anymore. They were coordinates, down to the inch. And every time the spot matched a death in the county records. Some from my lifetime, some long before I was born. I found myself driving out to them, even when I swore I wouldn't. I'd tell myself I was just checking. just making sure it was nothing, but it was never nothing. One night, they gave me coordinates out by the river bend. I followed them at dawn, the mist still heavy over the water. And there, in the mud, I saw it, a cross, small handmade, rotten wood half sunk into the bank. I hadn't noticed it before, but someone had put it there years ago, a marker for a body the river never gave back. Standing there, I felt sick, because I realized the truth. These weren't just calls, they were instructions, and I was following them. I tried to stop, tried to ignore the voices, to shut off the radio at night. But even when I turned the dial, the static leaked through, and the voices always found me. Sometimes I'd hear them in the hum of the refrigerator, in the rush of water through the pipes, whispering coordinates I tried not to memorize, but couldn't forget. The dead didn't want to be remembered. They wanted to be found. And for some reason, they'd chosen me. I held out longer than I thought I could. For weeks, I told myself I'd never respond. I'd listen, maybe write down what I heard, but I wouldn't press that button. I wouldn't give the dead the satisfaction of hearing me answer, but silence can wear a man down. Silence. And the weight of being the only one awake in a dark room with voices crawling out of the static. The radio had become the only sound in the building after midnight. The clock on the wall ticked like it was mocking me, each second a reminder that no one was coming. No one ever came at that hour except them. That night started like the others. The static hissed, soft at first, then sharper. I leaned forward without meaning to, already bracing myself for the voice. It was a man's voice this time, calm. Too calm. He said, "You hear us, don't you?" I froze. It wasn't like the other calls, not broken or frantic, not fading in and out. This one was steady, clear. I could almost picture him. Not the face, but the presence. Standing just out of sight, leaning closer to the mic, speaking directly to me. "You've been following," he said, marking the places. "You know what's left behind." I didn't touch the mic. My hand hovered near it, fingers twitching. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. That I hadn't been keeping track, hadn't been letting the map fill up with death. But I had. And we both knew it. The static buzzed. Then the voice came again, firmer this time. "Say something." I backed away from the desk, shaking my head. My chest felt tight. It was one thing to hear them cry out for help, to whisper directions in the dark. But this was different. They knew me. They were waiting for me. I tried to leave the room, but I couldn't. The farther I got from the radio, the more it felt like something was pulling me back. I told myself it was just pressure. Just my mind unraveling after too many sleepless nights. But deep down, I knew. If I didn't answer, they weren't going to stop. So I went back to the desk. I sat down, hand shaking as I picked up the mic. My thumb hovered over the button, and then, before I could think, I pressed it. My voice cracked when I spoke. "Who are you?" For a moment, there was only static. My own breathing filled the room, heavy, uneven. Then the voice came back. And this time, it spoke my full name. Not just my first name, my last two. The way my mother used to call me when she was angry. The way it looked typed across my academy papers. Hearing it out loud made my stomach twist. I let go of the mic like it had burned me. My hands trembled on the desk. No one had ever said my name over that channel. Not once in all the years I'd worked there. "Don't be afraid," the voice said. "Calm, steady, almost kind. We've been waiting for you." My throat went dry. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. It felt like the whole room had shifted, like the air was thicker, pressing down on me. I managed to whisper, "How do you know my name?" The answer came quick. "Too quick. We know everything about you. We've always been with you." I slammed the mic down, heart pounding. I wanted to believe it was some sick prank, some bastard with a scanner playing games. But no prankster could have known that tone, the weight behind the words, the way it sank into me like a hook. The radio popped again, louder now. The voice sharpened. "You've walked where we've died. You've marked our graves. You've listened, even when you swore you wouldn't. That makes you ours." I stood up so fast the chair tipped over. My legs carried me toward the door, but I stopped in the hall. I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave it talking to no one. I crept back, staring at the radio from the doorway like it was alive. The red light blinked, steady, patient. Then it spoke again. "You can't ignore us forever." I pressed my hands against my face, trying to block it out. But the voice was inside now, under my skin. It wasn't asking for help. It wasn't giving me coordinates. It was speaking to me. Directly. Personally. And it knew my name. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat there until the sun came up, staring at the silent radio, waiting for it to crackle back to life. But it didn't. Not until the next night. When it did, the same voice returned. It said my name again, softer this time, like a whisper against the glass. Then it asked me something I still can't get out of my head. "Do you want to know where we really are?" The words hit me like a weight to the chest. I couldn't breathe, because I realized then the coordinates, the places, the graves, none of it was the end. It was the beginning. They weren't just showing me where they died, they were leading me somewhere else, and I was the one who had to follow. I still remember the phone call that pulled me out of bed that morning. It was early, too early for anything good. The kind of ring that rattles your bones before you even answer. "Sheriff?" the voice on the other end said, heavy with worry. "2 hunters didn't come back last night. Brothers. Went past the county line into the woods." I sat there on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall while the words sank in. Missing hunters weren't unusual around here. People got lost. They wandered too far. They underestimated how endless these woods can be. But there was something in the caller's voice. Something that made me feel colder than the morning air. I pulled on my uniform, laced up my boots, and drove out to the station. By the time I got there, the brothers' truck had already been found parked near the trailhead. No tracks leading back to it. No sign of them at all. Just the truck sitting quiet in the gravel, like it had been abandoned. I should have called for more help, maybe even the state boys, but something in me wanted to handle it. These were my woods, my county, my responsibility. The search party formed quickly. Deputies, a few locals who knew the land. The hunter's father showed up too, pale and shaking, holding his hat in both hands like a prayer. He kept saying, "They know these woods, Sheriff. They wouldn't just disappear." I nodded, told him we'd find them. But in my gut, I wasn't sure. We set out at dawn. The woods beyond the county line are different, older. The trees grow tighter together, the air heavier. You can walk for an hour and feel like you haven't moved at all. The compass spins strange sometimes, like it doesn't want to work. Folks around here don't like going past that line. They say the land changes there. The first hours of searching were quiet. Too quiet. Normally the woods carry sound, birds, wind, maybe the crunch of a deer moving through the brush. But that morning, nothing. Just the snap of our own boots against the undergrowth. I tried calling out their names, my voice echoing in a way I didn't like. It sounded swallowed, like the trees took it and buried it deep. Around midday, we split into pairs to cover more ground. I took Deputy Howard with me. He's young, eager, still thinks the badge makes him bulletproof. He carried his rifle like he expected a bear to jump out any second. "Sheriff," he whispered after a while, "don't you think it's strange? No tracks, no blood, nothing at all?" "Plenty of time for signs," I said. But I was lying. I'd been looking too, and I didn't like what I wasn't seeing. Even lost men leave something behind. A footprint, broken branches, cigarette butts. But the woods looked untouched. Untouched in a way that felt wrong. We found the first sign near a dry creek bed. Not a footprint, not blood. Just a scrap of orange fabric tangled on a thorn bush. Hunting vest material. I pulled it free, held it up to the light. It was torn jagged, like something had ripped it off. Howard shifted beside me, glancing around the trees. "What do you think did that?" "Could have snagged on the branch," I said. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The tear was too clean, too forceful. We pressed on, following the creek bed deeper into the woods. The air grew thicker, the trees bending inward like they were leaning closer, listening. By late afternoon, we regrouped with the others. No luck, not a trace beyond that fabric. The father was growing desperate, his voice cracking as he begged us to keep going. I told him we would, but I could see it in everyone's eyes. We were already feeling the weight of the place. That night, we set up camp near the creek. The men lit a fire, though the smoke curled upward in strange ways, like it didn't want to rise. We ate in silence, listening for any sound beyond the crackle of the flames. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of footsteps. Not close, but not far either. Just outside the reach of the firelight. Slow. Measured. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it across the trees. Nothing. The woods stared back at me. Still and dark. "Howard," I whispered. He stirred, rubbed his eyes. "You hear that?" He sat up, listening. For a moment, the footsteps stopped. Then they started again, circling. We both stood, rifles in hand, light scanning. Still nothing. Just trees. Just silence. Finally, the sound faded, gone as suddenly as it came. Howard looked at me, his face pale. "Sheriff, was that them?" I didn't answer. Because deep down, I knew it wasn't. Morning came slow. The fire had burned down to ash, and everyone looked worn, uneasy. We pressed further in, though the land felt heavier with each step. The deeper we went, the less it felt like the same woods we knew. Around noon, we found the second sign, a hunting knife driven deep into the bark of a tree. The handle was smeared with something dark. Not blood, something thicker, blacker, like oil. It glistened in the sunlight in a way that made my stomach turn. Howard reached for it, but I stopped him. "Don't touch," he frowned. "It's just a knife." "No," I said. "It isn't." The others gathered around, whispering. The father broke down then, sobbing into his hands. I wanted to tell him we'd bring his boys back. I wanted to believe it myself. But the woods had other plans. By evening, we hadn't found anything else. Just more silence, more endless trees. I called for us to head back, at least for the night. But when I turned to retrace our path, I froze. The trail was gone. I don't mean we lost it. I mean it wasn't there anymore. The landmarks we passed, the fallen log, the crooked pine, they weren't where they should be. It was like the forest had shifted while we weren't looking. The men started panicking, arguing about direction. Compasses spun lazy circles. GPS units blinked uselessly. The father fell to his knees, praying under his breath. I tried to stay calm, to act like I still had control. "We'll find it," I told them. "We just need to keep moving." But as the sun dipped behind the trees, I realized the truth. The woods weren't letting us out. That night, we didn't light a fire. No one wanted to draw attention. We sat in the dark, listening to the forest breathe, and somewhere out there, past the line of trees, I heard a voice, faint, calling. It was one of the brothers' names, but it wasn't right. It sounded stretched, broken, like the woods themselves were trying to speak. Howard looked at me, wide-eyed. "Sheriff?" I put a finger to my lips. "Don't answer." We sat there, frozen, as the voice moved closer. And in that moment, I knew those boys weren't just missing. The woods had taken them, and it wanted more. We didn't sleep much that night. Nobody said it out loud, but I could feel the fear rolling off the men. They were all pretending to rest, pretending to breathe steady, but I could hear the way their hearts beat too fast in the silence. I kept my hand on my rifle the whole time, eyes locked on the dark, waiting for the voice to return. It never did, but that was worse somehow. The silence felt heavier, as if the woods were holding their breath, watching us. By morning, everyone was restless. Howard kept pacing in circles, muttering to himself about direction and landmarks. The father looked hollow, like he'd aged 10 years overnight. I didn't feel much better. We set out again, no trail, no compass worth trusting. Just walking. The trees looked the same in every direction. Same thick trunks, same moss climbing up their bark, same dead leaves crunching underfoot. Every path felt like it bent back on itself. By noon, we found the first marking. It was Howard who noticed it. He stopped so suddenly I nearly ran into him. His hand trembled as he pointed. There, carved into the trunk of a pine, was a symbol. Rough, deep cuts. Not letters, not words. Just lines and angles forming a shape that hurt to look at. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. The wood around it was fresh, like it had been carved not long ago. One of the men muttered, "Hunters must have done it. Left a trail," but I knew better. Hunters don't carve things like that. Not something that precise, not something that felt deliberate. We pressed on. And that's when we found the second one, and the third, and then it was everywhere. Every tree, every trunk, every direction we turned, marked with the same carvings. As if we had stepped into a circle without realizing it. The men started whispering, panic lacing their voices. I told them to keep moving, to stay calm, but my own voice sounded weak, even to me. We walked faster, hoping to break free of whatever ring we had stumbled into, but the markings didn't stop. They followed. No matter where we turned, no matter how far we went, the symbols were there, freshly cut, staring back at us. It was like the forest was closing in. Howard broke first. He pressed his hands against one of the carved trunks, shouting at it. "Who's out here? Who's doing this?" His voice cracked, echoing through the trees, swallowed up like before. No answer came. I pulled him back, told him to keep his voice down. But inside, I wanted to scream too. The woods weren't just big anymore. They felt alive. They felt aware. We kept moving. Time blurred. The sun should have been high above us, but the canopy was so thick, so twisted, that the light seemed dimmer with each hour. Shadows stretched in places they shouldn't, bending the ground into strange shapes. Then we came upon the clearing. It wasn't large, just a circle where the trees bent away, leaving open space. In the center stood a single tree, taller than the rest, its trunk wider than a car, and carved into its bark was something different. Not just a symbol, a name. I froze when I saw it. My stomach dropped. It was one of the missing brothers' names, deeply cut, letters long and sharp, like claws had etched it there. The father fell to his knees, wailing. He touched the letters, his fingers tracing the grooves as if he could bring his son back by feeling his name. The men didn't speak. They just stared, pale and wide-eyed. Howard whispered, "This isn't right. Sheriff, this isn't right." I tried to think, tried to breathe. It could be them. Maybe they carved it themselves. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. The cuts were too deep, too clean. No pocket knife could have done that. And why would a hunter carve his own name into a tree in the middle of nowhere? We pulled the father away, forced him back to his feet. And that's when I noticed it. On the trees around the clearing, more names were carved. Not the brothers this time. Different names. Names I recognized. Locals. People who'd gone missing over the years. Folks we never found. I had filed their reports myself. Hikers, drifters, even kids. All their names etched into the bark like a graveyard without bodies. I felt sick. My throat closed up. The woods hadn't just swallowed those people. It had claimed them. Marked them. Howard whispered again, his voice shaking. "Sheriff, why are the trees watching us?" At first I thought he'd lost his mind. But then I saw it. The bark around the names seemed to pulse, just slightly, like breath beneath skin. The symbols on the trunks weren't just carved. They were alive. We ran. I don't even remember deciding. One second we were staring. The next we were tearing through the brush, branches whipping our faces, the father stumbling as we dragged him along. Nobody cared about direction anymore. We just needed distance, but the farther we went, the more the markings followed. On every trunk, every tree, the same carved symbols, the same endless circle. The forest wouldn't let us leave. By nightfall, we collapsed against a fallen log. Everyone was gasping, drenched in sweat, eyes darting at every shadow. The father wouldn't stop whispering his son's names, rocking back and forth like a child. Howard sat with his rifle across his lap, staring into the dark. His lips moved, but no sound came. He was praying. I wanted to believe prayer would help. But the truth was, I could feel the woods closing in tighter with each breath. That night, as the men dozed in fits, I stayed awake, listening. The forest was quiet at first. Then came the sound of knives on wood, slow, steady, scraping, all around us. I turned in circles, scanning with my flashlight. The beams caught glimpses, fresh cuts appearing on bark, lines forming, symbols spreading. No hands making them, no tools, just the wood splitting open on its own, carving itself. The sound grew louder, overlapping. Hundreds of scratches at once, and then, in the faint glow of the beam, I saw it. My name, carved clean into the trunk of a tree not 10 feet away. I dropped the light. My hands shook so bad I couldn't pick it up again. The scraping continued long into the night. By morning, None of us spoke. We just sat there, broken, waiting for something to change. But nothing did. The markings were still there. The names were still spreading, and the forest still wanted more. I never liked being deep in those woods at night. Even as a kid, they always seemed wrong, too quiet, like the trees were listening instead of moving with the wind. But a missing person changes everything. When you're wearing the badge, you don't get to follow your gut. You follow the trail. That night, I found myself several miles past the last dirt road. My flashlight beam caught the faint shape of a torn tarp caught in the branches, swaying like a flag. It told me someone had been here recently. The ground looked soft, disturbed, like boots had pressed too deep and too often. My boots crunched over old leaves as I stepped closer. At first glance, it looked like any forgotten campsite. A circle of ash where a fire once burned. An old folding chair half collapsed. A cooler tipped on its side, its lid missing. Empty beer cans, dented, scattered in the dirt. But something about it was wrong. It felt staged. The fire pit wasn't just dead, it was buried, like someone had pressed the ashes flat and smoothed them down. No embers, no heat, just a gray scar in the soil. I crouched low, brushing my hand across the dirt. It was cold, too cold, like it hadn't been lit in weeks, maybe months. And yet everything else, the tarp, the cooler, the scattered cans, felt recent. That was the first knot in my stomach. The second came when I noticed the bones. At first I thought they were sticks. Small white sticks scattered in the leaves, stripped clean. But the closer I looked, the more I realized. They weren't sticks. They were ribs. Tiny, delicate ribs, curved in shapes that didn't belong to any deer I'd ever seen. My flashlight followed them, tracing the way they'd been arranged. Not scattered, not random, placed. A spiral. Perfect. The bones led inward, circling smaller and smaller until they met in the center. I froze, staring. My first thought was maybe some kind of hunter, someone making art out of leftovers. But no hunter does that. Not in these woods. The air seemed to tighten around me, heavy, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. I swallowed hard and stepped deeper into the camp. Each step made the spiral clearer. It wasn't just one. There were several. 5, maybe 6. Each one made from different bones. Some larger, thick femurs and scapulas. Others small, delicate finger bones. They overlapped slightly. Spirals within spirals, like someone had sat here for hours arranging them. I tried to convince myself they were animal remains. Deer. Maybe pigs from a farm nearby. Anything but human. But the shapes. God, the shapes. The skull fragments were too round, too smooth. The jawbones too small. Teeth still clinging to them, yellow and cracked. Human. There was no other word for it. My radio hissed at my side, but I didn't touch it. I didn't want to make a sound, not yet. It felt like speaking would break something sacred. Like I'd invite whatever made those spirals to notice me. I kept moving, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The light swept over a tree at the edge of the camp. Something hung from it. At first I thought it was a lantern. Some old metal thing left swinging. But when I got closer, I realized it was a skull. It dangled from a cord, swaying slowly. A crack split it down the middle and the lower jaw was missing. Something dark stained the top, dried and flaked. I wanted to look away, but my light caught the others. 3 more. Hanging from different branches, each one swinging slightly like they'd only just been placed. The spirals weren't enough. Whoever did this wanted the bones above me too. Watching. My throat felt dry. My chest ached with each shallow breath. I should have turned around then, called it in, waited for backup. But I didn't. I kept walking. Part of me told myself it was duty. That if someone was still out here, God help them, I needed to find them. But another part of me, I think I just needed to know. Needed to see how far this sickness went. The deeper I moved into the camp, the stranger it got. There was a tent at the far end. It sagged, its fabric torn and blackened at the edges, like it had been scorched. I shined my light inside. More bones. Not arranged this time. Just piled. A mound reaching almost to the ceiling. Tiny hands mixed with larger arms. skulls half buried beneath femurs. It looked like someone had dragged them all together and left them there, waiting. The smell hit me then. Not rot. There wasn't enough flesh left for that. It was older, drier, like dust and iron, the kind of smell that seeps into your skin and doesn't leave. I pulled back, gagging, and steadied myself against a tree. My light slipped across the ground and caught something carved into the dirt. Words. I had to crouch low to see them, scratched deep into the soil, circling the base of the tent. The letters were jagged, uneven, almost childlike. Stay here, over and over again. I felt the hair rise on my arms. My breath came fast, clouding in the cold air. Stay here. Was it a warning? A command? Or a promise? I stood there too long, staring at those words, my mind trying to piece them together. That's when I noticed the sound. Not the forest. Not the wind. A soft rattle. Behind me. I turned fast, my light whipping across the camp. The spirals looked different now, like they had shifted when I wasn't looking. Bones leaning slightly closer together, tighter, curling inward more than before. I blinked hard. My eyes watered. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe it was just my nerves. But I swear they had moved. The rattling came again, the skulls hanging from the trees, their cords creaking as they swayed. Only now they were swaying harder, back and forth, like invisible hands had shoved them. The teeth clattered against each other, a dry, hollow chatter. I stumbled backward, my boots crunching on the leaves. My radio cracked with static again, a sharp hiss in the silence. I fumbled for it, pressing the button. My voice came out hoarse, broken. "This is Sheriff Davis. I found something." "At the camp. I need backup. Now." But the static swallowed my words. No reply. Just that endless hiss. I let go of the button, my hand shaking. The woods felt too close, pressing in on all sides. That's when I saw it. At the far edge of the camp, just past the last spiral, a figure. Not moving. Not breathing. Just standing. My light caught it for only a second before it slipped behind a tree. A tall shape. Too thin. Its arms hanging low. Too low. I wanted to chase it. I wanted to shout. But my legs wouldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, listening. The spirals seemed louder now, though they made no sound. Like they were humming in my skull, pulling at my thoughts. I thought of all the missing people. The ones whose families never got answers. The ones I told myself had run away or gotten lost, or simply vanished like the woods had swallowed them. But the woods hadn't swallowed them. They were here, arranged, displayed, kept. The spirals weren't just decoration. They were a cage, a ritual. And I had stepped right into it. I don't remember leaving the camp. One moment I was staring at those bones, and the next I was stumbling through the dark, branches clawing at my arms, my lungs burning. The trees felt endless, the ground twisting under me. I don't even know how I made it back to my truck, but I did. When I slammed the door shut and locked it, I finally allowed myself to breathe. My hands were still shaking so badly I could barely start the engine. The whole way back, I kept seeing that spiral in my head, perfect, endless, pulling me inward, and when I finally made it home, I thought I'd feel safe. But even now, sitting here, writing this down, I can still smell the dust of those bones. I can still hear the chatter of teeth swinging in the dark, and I know I didn't leave alone, because sometimes in the silence of my house, I hear it again. That dry rattle, closer each time. The strangest thing about those woods wasn't the bones. It wasn't even the spirals. It was the way the trees seemed to move when I wasn't looking. I noticed it the morning after the camp. I should have stayed home. I should have locked the door and ignored the calls, but I couldn't. I kept seeing that spiral every time I closed my eyes, the way it pulled me in like a drain in black water. So I went back. The forest was quiet that morning. Too quiet for late summer. No birds, no crickets, no wind in the branches. Just the crunch of my boots on the pine needles. I told myself I'd walk straight to the camp, mark it, and wait for backup this time. No wandering. No exploring. Just duty. But the woods had other plans. I swear the path had changed. I'd walked those trails 100 times before. Hunting, tracking, search parties. I knew where the ground dipped, where the trees broke into clearings, where the old fence line marked the county border. But that morning, nothing looked right. The pines were closer together, their trunks crowding each other like they'd grown overnight. The path I thought I knew twisted in ways I didn't remember. The air smelled different too, thick, sharp, like sap and iron. After a mile, I stopped and checked my compass. The needle spun slowly, then froze, pointing nowhere. That was when I felt the first flicker of real panic. I kept walking, trying to ignore it. My hands shook, so I stuffed them into my jacket pockets. Every few minutes, I looked back to mark the trail. I broke branches, dragged my boot through the needles, left signs a child could follow, but when I turned around again, they were gone. The branches I'd snapped were whole. The lines I'd carved into the ground had vanished. It was like the forest was swallowing my trail as fast as I could make it. I told myself it was just nerves. That maybe I'd missed the marks, or maybe I wasn't looking hard enough. But deep down, I knew better. The woods didn't want me to leave. Hours passed. At least I think they did. Time moved strangely in there. The sun stayed caught in the branches, pale and weak, never shifting higher or lower. My throat dried, but no matter how far I walked, I didn't find a stream. Just more pines stretching forever. The deeper I went, the more the trees leaned in on me. Their trunks bent in crooked angles, their roots curling out of the ground like claws. The forest floor rose and fell in ridges I didn't remember, hills folding into gullies that led nowhere. Every sound echoed too long. My own footsteps came back to me seconds later, like someone else was following just behind. I kept calling out, half to warn anyone nearby, half to remind myself I was real. "Sheriff Davis, county law! If anyone's out here, call back!" But no one did. The silence stretched so wide it felt alive. By mid-afternoon, I started seeing shapes in the trees. At first, just tricks of the light. Shadows bending like figures, gaps between branches forming faces. But the longer I stared, the more certain I became. There were eyes watching me, not glowing, not wide, just there, blinking between the bark, sliding from one trunk to another. I thought about the camp again. The spirals. The words scratched into the dirt. Stay here. Maybe they weren't written by whoever made that place. Maybe they were written by someone like me, someone who realized too late the woods weren't going to let them out. The thought made my stomach turn. I tried to turn back then. I picked a direction, any direction, and forced myself to walk it straight. No stopping, no looking around, no second guessing. Just forward. But the woods don't work like that. After what felt like an hour, I stumbled into a clearing. At first, relief washed over me. The sunlight spilled down more freely. The air opened up, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd found a way out. Until I saw what was in the center. Another spiral. Not bones this time. Not wood. Pine cones. Hundreds of them, laid out in the same perfect pattern, circling inward. I fell to my knees. My body just gave up. The sight broke something in me. I wasn't moving forward. I wasn't moving back. The forest was folding itself around me, spitting me out where it wanted me. I stared at that spiral until my vision blurred. And in the haze, I thought I saw something at the center. A hole, just wide enough for a hand. I didn't move closer. I didn't dare. But I couldn't look away either. It felt like it was breathing, the pine cones shifting in tiny, jerking motions, like something beneath them was pushing up against the surface. I forced myself to stand, my knees shaking. My throat ached from holding back a scream. I turned and ran. The trees closed in tighter. Branches whipped my face, tore at my jacket, dragged across my skin. I didn't care. I just kept running until my lungs burned. When I finally stopped, doubled over and gasping, I realized the light was fading. Not like evening. Not gradual. Just gone. The woods had gone dark. I raised my flashlight, my last line of safety. Its beam cut through the pines, trembling with my hands. The shadows stretched wrong, too long, bending against the light instead of with it, and then I heard it, a voice. Not far. Not near. Just everywhere. It didn't sound human. Not exactly. It was thin, broken, like wind threading through a cracked window. But I heard the words clear as day. Stay here. My stomach turned to ice. I whipped the light around, searching for a mouth, a body, anything. But there was nothing. Just trees! Just endless trees. I pressed my back against a trunk, forcing myself to breathe. The voice came again, softer, closer. Stay. The beam of my flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then it steadied. But the battery wasn't low. I knew it. The woods were playing with me. I don't know how long I stood there. Frozen. Minutes. Hours. The dark stretched like an ocean. At some point, I realized something terrible. The spiral wasn't just a mark on the ground. It wasn't just bones or pine cones or scratches in the dirt. The whole forest was a spiral, twisting me inward, pulling me deeper. I wasn't walking in circles. The circles were walking around me. The compass, the trails, the vanishing marks. It all made sense. I wasn't lost. I was being kept. The thought almost broke me. I wanted to collapse, to close my eyes and let it take me. But some small, angry part of me refused. I forced my legs to move again, one step at a time, muttering under my breath like a prayer. Keep walking. Keep walking. Keep walking. The voice didn't stop. It followed me, threading between the branches, whispering the same words over and over. Stay here. Stay. By the time I stumbled into another clearing, my flashlight was shaking so hard I could barely keep it steady. And that's when I saw it. A tree I recognized. At least, I thought I did. The bark was scarred with initials, old ones carved deep. I'd seen it before years ago on a hunting trip. I'd passed it twice that morning, too. But now it was here, miles from where it should have been. The forest wasn't just shifting around me. It was folding in on itself, repeating. I pressed my hand to the scar in the bark, my fingers trembling. The letters blurred through my tears. I whispered out loud, voice cracking in the empty air. I'm never leaving, am I? The trees didn't answer, but I felt them listening.